Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Jen and Jake Talk. And we're going to be doing something a little different from what we've been doing. New year, new us, baby. And today we're going to be doing something that's, you know, the kids these days, they really like rankings. They really like tier lists. They really like putting their opinions into these little exercises and whatnot and what have you. And I always thought that it might be interesting to go about doing a list of our individual favorite rappers. Jen and I are big hip hop heads, and we've expressed plenty of love for the form in the past. Basically, what we're going to do here is just use my list in ascending order to sort of go through basically both of our lists because I have a feeling that there's probably like 90% overlap. So we're going to use this as an excuse to kind of talk about things as we go. But the reason we wanted to do this is because, man, if you've seen other rapper like ranked or just like my favorite MC lists, they're the most boring shit in the world. And I don't say that as somebody who's just like, oh, I have super unique opinions, man. I'm a white hip hop nerd. Take everything I say with the smallest grain of salt. But if you go and look up lists like this, they are so boilerplate, cookie cutter. Well, you gotta have this person in the top three. You gotta have this person in the top five. No, you fucking don't. I do not care about having to put anyone anywhere on this list. I care about my preference and Jen's preference and your preference as a viewer. Share with us your lists below, of course, but none of that shit. None of that shit because it sucks. I don't care. Like, every list is like, oh, well, you gotta have Jay and Nas and Biggie and Tupac in the top five. And it's just like, what are we doing, guys? What are we doing here? So, any preliminary thoughts?
Yeah, preliminary thoughts. I'm thinking of this as an attempt to do something unique with a concept that I find pretty uninteresting, which is the all-time list. But I also want this to kind of be a time capsule for myself. Thinking about this as long as we've been going back and forth with this idea, just made me realize how little I knew about this world of music once upon a time. And so putting this list together was kind of like seeing all the growth that I did during those years. I was really learning about hip hop and the craft of music in general as it is today. And so I'm excited to go back and not just talk about these artists, but talk about my experiences, some nostalgic, some very contemporary, that's led me to this list being what it is.
Absolutely. Like, and we'll probably have a bunch of personal anecdotes and what have you, because we want to justify our placements and whatnot. But I actually kind of had a similar thought myself. Like, my mind sort of flashes back to 2017 when I first got into music, and I have such like a core memory of putting on the Doom remake, and then afterwards throwing on Mad Villainy for the first time, and it was just like, dude, my brain matter, like listening to that and then playing that at the same time. I was just like, I am going to be launched into the future. Like, it was so great. I'll have more to say about that when we get to it, but we do each have like the core list is gonna be 20 picks. However, we do both have some honorable mentions we're kind of gonna just go through off of the bat, and we don't know what each other's lists sort of like looks like. Jen arranged theirs alphabetically, and I did mine in ascending order, but again, the order and placement here is really just kind of nebulous. We're not worried about putting anyone over anyone else. This is literally just how strong their connection is to me, and Jen will also elaborate on that and what have you. So, without further ado, let's get this shit started. Let's run through my 26 through 21 real quick. And let's say, all right, number 26 I have on my list is ODB, Old Dirty Bastard.
He's on
Um,
my list.
okay, awesome. Uh, My placement here, justification wise, is that Old Dirty Bastard is the sort of preliminary to all of the weirdo fucking basement dwelling ass hip hop head hip hop. In that like ODB is a rapper's rapper and he's also fucking weird. And that's what makes him super special. Like you go back and you listen to Wu-Tang and I feel like as like an older person, ODB is the immediate standout. Like you recognize his voice immediately amongst all the other Wu-Tang members, and he also has these really unusual flows. Like he was this type of person who very much reflected a kind of just sort of frenzied kind of addled mess, but he made that work. And I think the only reason he's this low on my list is because we only have really the one great solo work from him. So I couldn't really justify internally placing him a little bit higher, but I also was like, nah, he's got to make at least the bottom of the list.
Yeah, I mean, I feel similarly about ODB, and spoilers, this is not the last time that I'm going to be talking about Wu-Tang.
Me
But
either.
yeah, I mean, he stands out immediately on those first few tracks on 36 Chambers. He is really a highlight personality against some other guys on that record that have more maybe voices that are more compatible with each other,
Mhm.
that play off of each other in a more what's the word I'm looking for, in a more precise way.
With a little bit more synergy, I guess. Like
Yeah, with a
you're
little bit more natural synergy. It's a little bit more coherent. It's like a solid chord, where ODB is the kind of staccato mess of a guy who can take on all different kinds of functions for songs, whether that's, giving a good intro, giving a good verse, giving a good chorus. One of my favorite turns of his is actually on Liquid Swords on the hook of Duel to Iron Mike, where he just takes on this
great
perfect
shout.
wrestling announcer persona with what he's doing, and it's so great. But yeah, I don't think any list is complete without at least an honorable mention of ODB.
Yeah, ODB, like without ODB, you don't get Danny Brown. Like that's to me, that's like a direct lineage in my mind. And we've, talked at length about Danny Brown, another person who might pop up on this very list. And funnily enough, at 25, I actually do have my other Wu-Tang inclusion because I was just like, okay, I need to have another member of the Wu-Tang on my list. But this one's like my personal favorite. So, there's a lot of people I'm leaving out, obviously. So this is sort of a Wu-Tang placeholder pick. My 25 is Ghostface Killah. And I mean, like, if you ask me who the strongest fundamentalist in Wu-Tang is, I'd probably say him. It's him or RZA, but I give the slight edge to Ghostface because I think he has the best solo catalog of anyone in the Wu-Tang Clan. Like, he's got multiple classics, and when you assign that and you'll pick turns on albums like Liquid Swords, for instance, it's like if you just include every great thing that Ghostface ever did, he has the biggest volume of great shit. That's basically the best way I can put it. He's the strongest fundamentalist, but at the same time, he's really goofy and silly. I have a real fondness for his 12 Reasons to Die albums where he basically cosplays a mafioso mobster that is in like this gang war. And there's also this supernatural edge to it. It's real fun, it's real goofy, but like there's and not to mention you have shit like Supreme Clientele. Like you just really can't go wrong with Ghostface.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other great places to get good Ghostface as well. He's marketed as the co-star of Raekwon's "Only Built for Cuban Links," which is a very
Mhm.
appropriate description because he's all over that album, basically backing up Raekwon, and he does a great job.
Yeah, huge sort of stalwart of 90s hip hop. Again, no list complete without. Um, oh
He's
boy,
also the
we're
person that I think the most about today when I think about Wu-Tang, namely because he's still working on really good stuff. You know, he has the feature on Mr. Morale. He's featured on the Neighborhoods self-titled album.
Really? That
Yes,
is
they did
such an unusual place for like an old school rapper to pop up.
a whole EP of basically rap collaborations because Denzel Curry's on it, he's on it, and there's I think posthumous Nipsey Hussle feature on it as well.
Well, shit, that sounds like a little bit of a hidden gem. Check that out for all who are interested. Shit. Um, We're going right from Wu-Tang to another hip hop collective, one that Jen and I have spoken about at length on this channel in the past. Number 24 on my list is Kevin Abstract, Brockhampton.
Okay.
If you are even remotely familiar with either of us, you know this was just a matter of time before we eventually got to Brockhampton. And, I'm just gonna go ahead and toss in my other Brockhampton inclusion here just so we can talk about them as a whole, because my 21, so right before the list proper, is Don McLennan. My The other sort of like, I think of Kevin and Dom as sort of like the standout voices of specifically Saturation 1, 2, and 3. Like those two presences are the ones that anchor everyone else on those albums. Like Kevin's the front man. He's sort of who you think of when you first think of Brockhampton, and he's got pretty comfortably the best solo catalog of music. Like all of his pre-Brockhampton stuff, there's a lot of really great shit in there, like American
Mm.
Boyfriend, or just the couple of the side projects that he did with other members of the band. But like I feel like because Brockhampton is Brockhampton, that they are a collective and that they are a little bit in the past now, the individual talents of the members get supremely overlooked. And Kevin, I had to give it to just because the versatility he shows is like second to none. You want someone who can sing, you want someone who can write hooks, you want something who can do good verses or just deliver like really solid production work, who works well with other people. He's just like instant alchemy to whatever you're doing. He's the X factor. He is the special thing about whatever he's doing at the current moment. And my inclusion of Dom is really just because he's the lyrical miracle of the group. He's the rapper's rapper of Brockhampton, in that nobody is going to have tighter flows, nobody's going to have better rhymes, no one's going to have better lyricism than Dom. And not to mention Dom has his verse on Milk, probably my favorite hip hop verse of all time.
Yeah. I should also get into my own feelings about Dom since Dom did make my list as well. So, yeah, a lot of what you said is correct. For me, Dom is a standout writer, standout performer of the group. When I was first getting into them, the verses that stuck with me the most were both his, and I'm going to shout out two that are very different and really show his kind of breadth. And the first one is the first verse of the actor weapon combo in Star,
Yeah.
where
Oh
I'm just
God,
like,
it's
oh,
so
this
good.
guy is running with a gimmick that gets to me very personally as a horror fanatic, and is doing it without a lick of irony that you would normally get out of
Hope and Bell with
what
the
could
song.
be such a gimmicky thing to do. And then my other one that I really wanted to point out that really cemented my want to get obsessed with this group was his verse on Dearly Departed, easily the most dramatic without going into the direct melancholy of stuff like Roadrunner of any
Mhm.
individual verse Brockhampton ever made. Um, that's those two put together. I feel like if you're looking to get into Brockhampton, if you're thinking about individual members, that is a great place to start with understanding why Brockhampton ended up working so well in the long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, and not to mention, there are other people who I feel like are worthy sort of like shout outs who are great rappers, but like I like when it comes to the art of rapping, those two are the ones that I think of. Like people like Matt and Joba and Merlin, they're kind of like polymaths. They're kind of more focused on the fact that they are everymen. Like everybody who's come out with good um solo work post Brockhampton, Joba and Matt are the two that leap to mind. It's just like they can just kind of do everything, and that's what makes them special. But here, I feel like Kevin and Dom, like they are also multi-talented, but it's the pen that I come back to them both for. Like I also feel like Kevin as like a standout on my list as being, you know, a queer MC, which is not particularly common, and if you are one, you're probably not super popular. So Kevin's vulnerability is also a huge part of his appeal. I'm thinking about certain tracks on Saturation 2, for instance, where it's just like it's really apparent that this guy is going to share and expose some of the darkest and just generally most unsavory parts of himself in his music, and that's what made a lot of people latch on to it. So couldn't not shout them out, especially considering if you know, look at other lists like this. They're a newer group, so of course they get paid dust, but they're also not going to get paid anything else, considering they are in fact a group.
And I want to extend the Brockhampton discussion a little bit because one more member did make my
Mm,
list. That actually is Joba.
great shit. I
And
absolutely agree with the pick though.
a lot of what you said about Joba, that he is a very multi-talented and interested in expressing those multiple talents, is very true and can be found not just in his own solo discography, obviously, but in his work with the band. You can find a lot of his want to grow his skill as not just a rapper and a lyricist in that sense, but also as a singer, as a writer of hooks, as an
Mhm.
instrumentalist. He's done instrumental work for the band all throughout their catalog, and his first is it his first solo effort, Russell Boring, or is there one before that that I'm not
I
thinking about?
believe that is his first.
Yeah, so his solo debut, Russell Boring, which gets in a much more piano rock direction. He's a guy who has a lot of different interests in music and how to express what's going on in his life, but really what cements him on my list is his continued presence and continued growth and impact across the latter half of the group's discography.
Absolutely. Which
The
makes him doubly
versatility
unappreciated, frankly.
the versatility that he was able to show between Iridescence, Ginger, and Roadrunner, especially the final official album of the group being the place where he easily shines the most that he shined in any individual project. You can see a real evolution there as the group becomes more and more tumultuous. You're seeing him reflect that and synthesize that into music that has more depth, that is more complex, that lets him get a lot more complicated feelings across. The fact that he almost puts in the final word for the band in an official sense is something that really shouldn't be overlooked when looking at their history.
You know, it's a real damn shame that like Roadrunner really feels like an album that disappeared from the popular consciousness as soon as it was released. Because like when I think about that album, which to this day I think is Brockhampton's most solid record, like holistically, even if it may not be my favorite, I don't think anything will ever, you know, change Iridescence from my heart. It's just a bit too lodged in there for its own good. But with Roadrunner in particular, it's like that album is that album because of like the two central performers, which I would argue are Kevin and Joba. Like Joba is the reason I feel like that album sticks the landing because of The Light and The Light Part 2, which are again, like I praised Kevin for his vulnerability before, but like Joba's verse in The Light Part 2, that shit is still unbelievably difficult to listen to. Like that and like listening to some of the like Mac Miller pre sort of like or like early posthumous stuff is like it's some of the hip hop music that I appreciate the most and can listen to the least because it's like, oh wow, this is too much. Oh, it's too much. Can't do it right now. Can't do it. But I'm glad that we both got to shout them out. I'm actually looking over my list and I'm discovering that all of my honorable mentions are people who are involved in groups that are much more popular than they are, which is a damn shame, but also kind of convenient for the sake of this list. Because next up on my list is one half of probably the most beloved hip hop duo of all time. That, of course, being fucking Big Boy of Outkast. Um, enough, I really didn't get all in on Outkast until last year, as a matter of fact. I'd always really appreciated their music, but I feel like there's a, kind of a grace period when you discover certain artists where it's just like, oh, these albums, they're really good. They're really strong, but they're not like, ones that you are going to continually come back to and stuff. Like, lots of the Outkast catalog is like really big, really long. A lot of those earlier albums also have like a bizarre amount of lesbophobia on them, which is just like Andre, like calm down, dude. Jesus. But Big Boy is on my list for like one core reason, and that's because usually people leave him off because they will
Yeah.
go for Andre first and foremost. And look, I understand. No, really, I understand Andre is going to be here later. But Big Boy often gets cast aside just because Andre is obviously like it's like Andre is both an all-rounder and is also just ridiculously good at everything. So it's like I get it, but at the same time, you need the fundamental talent of Big Boy to anchor you so that Andre can come in and do his weird Prince shit. Like you need Big Boy in order to sort of serve as an effective counterpoint that again creates what we've been talking about a little bit with people who are in groups, more alchemy. You need to have synergy with whoever you're working with. And there's no better person to sort of toss, the relay off to other than Andre. But even then, it's like it's not just about like contrast. Big Boy is an incredible fucking rapper. Like go back and listen to my favorite Outkast album, the debut, Southern Playlistic. That's Big Boy's fucking album, dude. He's on fire. Every fucking bar is heat. I like a lot of why that album is one of my favorites ever is just because of how fucking insane the production of like Organized Noise and all of them is. Like from the get-go, it's incredible shit. And they basically end up defining Southern hip hop by, being their, out there and colorful versions of themselves. Like Big Boy may be a fundamentalist, but he's still fun. He's still, somebody who I enjoy listening to because every single bar, every single word feels carefully considered, but in a way where it's just like he obviously doesn't take himself too seriously. And also, he unlike Andre, has come out with his own solo material that is really, really solid and isn't a 2 hour ambient flute album. I like that ambient flute album, by the way, but that ain't what you're going for when you want to hear Andre rap.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say it, but I don't have much else to add on the way of Outcast. That is a group that, like you were expressing earlier, I've kind of let slip over me, and I appreciate some of what they've done, but I still need to do that deep dive. So,
It is definitely one worth taking, but you got to wait until you're in the exact right mood.
mhm.
And last of the honorable mentions, this is one that I have down here because, like, I might put him a little higher on like I said, my personal list. This is my personal list. If I wasn't doing this for YouTube, I'd probably place him a bit higher, but it's because, again, he's kind of a multi-talented guy and doesn't always specifically rap, and it's an unconventional choice. But my number 22 is MC Ride of Death Grips. Um, and MC Ride is here for a couple of reasons. One being he is a rapper. He does rap. It doesn't always sound like you imagine, or the flows aren't exactly smooth, but he is a rapper. That said, he is also a shouter, a screamer, if you will. But Death Grip's sort of industrial hip hop noise, I feel like the bar for entry is MC Ride, just because a lot of the, production and what have you is going to be like really intense. It's really going to get you, if you've never listened to a Nine Inch Nail song in your life, this is probably going to beat the shit out of you. But with MC Ride, there's something like you hear his voice and you're instantly like, whoa, what? I didn't expect that guy to sound like that. Deeper, but like again, he's really like he speaks with his like upper register. He like talks from the back of his throat, so he's just like, "Oi!" And he like really gets in there. So his delivery's super duper unique. But like as a lyricist, super fucking underrated. Mainly because anyone outside the smelly Death Grips fan base, which I would have
God.
taken more reticence in calling out, but they did that thing where they pissed at a concert once, and I'm like, I'm making fun of y'all forever now. But uh you go and look at his lyricism, and it's just like beneath the veneer of chaotic noise is a lot of really like some of it's just really fucking surreal and out there, and sometimes it's descriptions of like living in the dirt and the gutter are like this is what the Velvet Underground was in the fucking 60s, man. Like this is exactly that. And it's grimy and gross, but it's also like emotional and existential. Like he is a fantastic writer for whatever he's trying to do at any given moment. And I'd say that he's also a versatile performer, given that Death Grips have a multitude of different sounds and genres that they play with over the course of their career. But like Ride's here for the sake of novelty. Like, I don't know how other hip hop people would react to this placement being on here, but with like just such Death Grips were such a force, in the 2010s, and they were such a big sort of thing in underground music. I feel like you almost can't not have MC Ride in some capacity because he kind of expanded what people thought it could be and what people thought that it could be in like a more popular sense. So I mean, you really got to give it up to the dude for, expanding the horizons of his listener base, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, I really agree with the take here that Death Grips and MC Ride really are owed a spot because I mean they've inspired a whole scene that has maybe not penetrated the old head conversations that dominate projects like this and lists like this. And part of the reason I wanted to do this is because I know that's a scene that we are both very interested in and very involved with and have had a lot of conversations about already. So I love that we're already hearing some of that later influence of the more online, more experimental, more industrial side of hip hop of the mid to late 2010s, and even as it's evolved to today. Finally, we can start seeing that represented on some lists like this. I think we're getting to the point where we can start having real discourse about MCs like Ride and who's not on my list, JPEG Mafia, and guys in that same circle be a part of this conversation of who's going to leave the biggest impact for the times.
And there might be a couple more of them on my list. But now, honorable mentions are out of the way, baby. We're going from 20 now. Number 20, I have Freddie Gibbs. Now, here's the thing with Freddie Gibbs. His discography is inconsistent. And I say that because if you look at all of his releases, Freddie was grinding on the mixtape game for a long, long time. He has a lot of them. Some of them better than others, but he's got some really solid ones in there. But it's really his work with Madlib that I think puts him over the edge, being Pinata and Bandana. Um, Pinata being a perfect 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5 gold star A plus album from yours truly. Because God, I love the production on that album so fucking much. But Freddie has to come in and has the unenviable task of having to compete essentially with Madlib on that album to sort of hold his own spotlight. And I'll be good goddamned, he actually manages to do it. And same thing on Bandana as well. Not as consistent of a project because few albums are, honestly, but like I love basically everything. When Freddie is on, this dude is fucking on. He is amazing at being an all-rounder. He has a lot of personality. He's got like a really sort of unique sounding voice. He's got this really sort of huskiness to his voice that a lot of people don't quite have. His flows are absolutely fucking ridiculous. Like when it comes to skill of like hip hop, Freddie's up there, frankly. However, his inconsistent discography and his kind of failure since Bandana to kind of live up to the acumen that he sort of built for himself, and with other mixtapes he did in the 2010s, like I think his mixtape Shadow of a Doubt is like super fucking underrated, an amazing fucking album. It features him rapping on a Jay Dilla beat with a fucking Black Thought. It's fucking absurd. Um, but he's incredible. I just wish that he was able to summon the juice a little bit more often, which is why he's kind of on the lower end of my list.
Yeah, unfortunately, Freddie Gibbs is another one where I'm not going to have much to add. I only know a little bit of his. I'm a big fan of the Mad Lib stuff. I would need to get more into the mixtape stuff to really say where he would fit in a list like this.
He's again, it's difficult to say what's like super special about him because he's so reliant on other people. Um, that being said, I've come to really appreciate his voice, artistic voice, that said. Like when you separate him from the sort of his contemporaries, I guess. That said, fucking stop getting into fucking beefs, dude. Like I don't Nobody fucking cares that you don't like JPEG Mafia. Nobody fucking cares, dude. I like just fucking go make music. I don't fucking. He
The
also has the funniest Instagram of anyone on this list, so I'll give him that much. Uh,
the funniest is that honestly is a feat for rap these days is a
look,
funny Instagram.
and you know what? We're probably gonna have a couple on this list that are gonna give him a run for his money. But number 19 is definitely not gonna be one of those. This is a stark fucking pivot.
Okay.
19, I have Mach-Hommy. Um,
Okay.
of the Griselda people who, frankly, are just like, how the fuck are those guys as consistent and as like prolific as they are? Because like it's not like Griselda's the biggest fucking label in the universe or anything, but like all those guys are churning out stuff. And Mach-Hommy I kind of put with them because he's the same sort of underground rapper, same sort of sensibilities as them. Again, if you like shit like Madlib or like MF Doom or whatnot. Earl Sweatshirt's another one who comes to mind. Mach-Hommy's, a hop, skip, and a jump away from those guys. Um, he's kind of got a weird, I don't want to say a cult of personality online, but he's kind of built up mystique by the fact that on some of his more beloved records like The Gospel According to, my favorite project of his so far. He doesn't release lyrics to some of his songs, which is like pretty fucking imperative. But it also forces you that, like, if you're a hip hop head and you really like his music, and I do, you're you're gonna go to the internet and you're going to be like, all right, what have other people transcribed about these songs? What can I do with this? And it sort of tacitly encourages a more active participation in the artistic interpretive process. And I value that a lot these days as somebody who's like willing to ask a little bit more of their audience. But also, Mach-Hommy's just a fucking good ass rapper. His album last year, Rich Haitian, was fucking excellent. It kind of got its flowers, but still not to the extent that I feel like it maybe deserved to. As that was probably my hip hop album of the year up until Tyler came and just sort of snatched that from basically anybody. But I like Mach-Hommy, and I hope that he is able to continue his output just because he's also like, as someone who frequently speaks on issues that really affect like, the Haitian community in the United States or just directly speaks to their experience, a valuable voice as well, something that we don't hear a lot of that I feel like should be more appreciated.
Yeah. Mach-Hommy, I mean, yeah, exhibits a lot of the values that I know we hold with our most beloved art, which is like give the audience something to chew on, challenge the audience, challenge the music industry in certain ways. I know people joke about the price of his merch sometimes, but I honestly really respect it.
No, I also really respect it because like at the end of the day, if you're putting out quality work and you think that it's worth something, then like go for it, dude. Like if you can make a living that way and people actually want it, then people actually want it.
Yeah, if it works, it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Hmm. Yeah. Just again, a solid all-rounder, fucking somebody who needs more attention. So if you're not already on the Makami train, get on it because I really feel like his album last year put him on a lot of people's radar that he previously
Mhm.
wasn't on. So get on that shit. And number 18, I have an unconventional pick here, but one that I nonetheless stand by quite resolutely just because of how much I've been a fan of this person's work, and that's More Mother, number 18.
Yes.
More Mother is, in my opinion, maybe one of the most utterly fascinating artists working today. My first sort of encounter with her is when we reviewed her album in 2022, Jazz Codes, which I remember listening to and being like, dude, what the fuck? This is so incredible. And I mean, like, yeah, it fucking is. That album, like, assembled, like, together with, like, pieces of sound collage and, like, hypnagogia into a pretty straight-laced hip hop album where More Mother is spitting heat. And I think that besides the fact that she's evidently incredibly skilled and is a hugely thoughtful writer. We're talking about somebody whose last project was a spoken word kind of ambient record that was basically detailing the entire history of slavery in America. Like, this is somebody who puts the utmost thought into their words, and that is already enough to make me value her. But really, what I love about her is how versatile she is that she's got that album from before. She's also got albums where like she's doing work with punk and no wave artists too. And
She's got
like
a new one coming out with Sumac.
oh man, that'll be one of my most anticipated albums for this year for sure, just because there's never like when I go to a More Mother project, I'm always in for something I don't expect, don't anticipate, and am glad was there even though I didn't expect or anticipate it. Like she's just somebody I'm thankful like, you know, kind of got in more circulation ever since Jazz Codes because she deserves to stay in the popular consciousness. Like go like literally go buy her vinyl, go buy her merch, go buy her shit because I want her to be able to make art until she damn well stops. So,
I got really into More Mother around the release of 2020's Brass, her collab album with Billy Woods.
oh yeah,
And
that's a hip
I
hop album of the decade candidate for me.
that album immediately resonated with me. I was listening to it all throughout 2021. I just couldn't stop. I was listening to it constantly. Then in 2021, she releases another album, Black Encyclopedia of the Air, which gets
Hmm.
into some very philosophical, very theoretical, lyrical spaces, lyrical practices that would be extended onto the more conceptually focused, The Great Bailout. But I want to shout out both Black Encyclopedia of the Air and her earlier project, Analog Fluids of Solid Black Holes, both extremely compelling and complex spoken word jazz rap projects that are sonically very interesting, and just as a lyricist, as a vocalist, I find More Mother extremely underrated. So many line deliveries on Brass that I've never been able to shake. She just knows how to make a sentence hit. I've never forgotten the way that she says, "There goes the neighborhood. Here comes Mama with the Glock."
Oh God, like her delivery is so like taken for granted. Like I fucking love like if I could take a moment to just read some of let me just pull this up here real quick because she's got a verse on this song called Rock Cried.
Also from
And I
Brass. Oh
which
boy.
yeah, More Mother's verse on Rock Cried here, which is I hold space that can't be curved, snake coil rib cage of dark goddess, hallowed be thy name in the belly of existence. Mystic nights of square fables, snake and man, lamb and sacrifice, mothers of darkness, a priest without his head, council of 33 inside the dome of heaven, under the tongue a reverend. O Lord, O God, don't come down, stay hide. The rock cried, I can't hide you. They go and find you. They're going to lynch you and call it suicide. Where are you going to run to? The rock cried. The rock cried. Like, bars! Holy shit! Like, you could break down her, like, syllabic shit the way that people break down MF Doom verses on something like Rock Cried. And honestly, her delivery is not a million miles away from that. Like, to the point where her and Billy working together on a project is like fucking it's fucking peanut butter and fucking bread, man. It's just like, why is this combination not exist for ever? But I have more to say about Brass, but I will probably talk about it a little later.
Hold the nugget for Brass because I have a feeling we're going in a similar direction here.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Number 17 on my list. This is where the order starts to get a little bit more set in stone. Usually with lists like these, the higher up, the more I've thought about the placement. And this is at the point where I was just like, there's no way this guy is this low. Like I can't, like with how much I've talked about him, how much I listen to him, and how much like I generally just hold space for the dude. I can't believe he's only number 17. But 17 is Denzel Curry. And I have a distinct reason as to why he's lower on my list. Is that if you've been paying attention, actually, Jen and I were both present for when we reviewed a not the most recent Denzel Curry project because that was King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 and the deluxe edition of that. But before that, Melt My Eyes was the album that we reviewed. And in it, I was just basically talking about how Denzel was one of my favorite modern rappers. It's just like the dude just kind of has everything and always has that oh so glorious Southern hip hop production behind him, which is always just pitch fucking perfect. Like, I love Denzel's sound probably more than any other single aspect of him. Like, as a curator, I actually think he's kind of underrated. The people he chooses to work with and like just he's got vision as in like he's somebody I can see 10 years down the line. It's not exactly like he's in the same league of popularity as, like a Travis Scott, for instance. He's not going to move or do those kind of numbers. But I feel like in 10 years, people are going to be like, Denzel Curry, man, if he's not in your top 10, what the fuck are you doing? The reason he's number 17, because he's an amazing rapper. Like, I love his voice. He's really, really funny, but he's also super emotional. That said, there's not really a Denzel Curry project that I can hold up as being like, that's the one for me. Like I love most of his albums. Melt My Eyes is like that's a good album, but that's sort of the one that I just don't really get along with as much as his other ones. And the thing is like I've listened to him talk in interviews and stuff where he's just like somebody was just like, so do you see Melt My Eyes as your masterpiece? And he's like, no. He goes like, that's later. That's coming down the line. He's like, I got something I'm working on right now. And another thing that I'm just like he knows that this is going to be his big thing. Like I, more than anything else, I need to see what Denzel Curry's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy ends up being because it's probably going to be fucking amazing. But until we get something that's just like, this is the Denzel project for Jake, he'll probably be more or less in like the teens here. But that said, I love him basically just as much as anybody in the top 10.
Yeah, one of the most consistent lyricists, consistent producers out there. Very good curator of collaborations, very good curator of sounds. The grand aesthetic project that was his most recent work, the album version of King of the Mischievous South, really showed his ability to put together an aesthetic which I knew he had this talent, right? I've listened
Mhm.
to Melt My Eyes. I've listened to especially Unlocked, which is an insane aesthetic curation
Oh yeah.
as far as the specificity and the finesse of it goes. But listening to King of the Mischievous South is like watching an album unfold before your eyes through a wormhole to a completely different past of the genre. It takes so much of what hip hop used to sound like and brings it ripped whole cloth with his own great approaches to lyricism and collaboration and song structure in ways that I've just never seen anybody of his caliber try to pull off. And frankly, just because of his young energy and his age being very close to mine, he is one of the guys I go to the most when somebody asks me about this generation of hip hop. It's Denzel Curry.
Abso-fucking-lutely. For the record, I actually revisited Melt My Eyes because of the extended edition where he performs a lot of the songs from that album in like a live jazz setting. And man, those songs really come alive in this context. Like, I can't recommend that enough just because I remember listening to that and I was just like, yeah, if the whole album was like this, that would be a different fucking story. Um, that said, interesting sort of tidbit is that last year, amidst all of the, because hip hop was on the brain last year, in the middle of the year, when I took my great hiatus from the internet and then subsequently went to the hospital and was sort of stuck in my room for 2 weeks, is that I eventually became so stir crazy that I was, again, we were talking about hip hop and shit, is that there are rumblings under the surface. If you go on the internet in certain spaces, people are just like, yo, man, there's gonna be a Denzel Curry and Jid album. I just fucking know it. And they both have been like, I love working with this person. I've made music with them. Like they've basically all but said it's happening.
Right.
And and so I was just like, what if I like made my own version of it because they've worked together a lot. If I could assemble all of a bunch of those and then like a bunch of songs that are like B-sides or like one-off singles and like put it together in a way that makes sense and I actually fucking did it. And it's such a like it is one of the albums I listened to the most last year just because it was so fucking like I love putting together disparate sounds from like the southern hip hop angle. Like to me, that's like my favorite incarnation of the genre's sound. So I'm gonna latch on to anybody who's carrying the torch forward. But to me, Denzel is like I kind of feel like Denzel Curry is ASAP Rocky if ASAP Rocky kept making good music instead of whatever the fuck he's been doing for the last 10 years. Like
That Taylor Swift single is good though. He's a little bit back in
I
time.
certainly maybe him getting shook awake in the Drake beef was what he needed to come back, but it's just like Denzel is the fulfillment of the promise of Live Love ASAP, where it's like you hear this big ass Clams Casino production and you're just like, damn, I don't think hip hop has ever sounded this grand. And then you take a listen to something like Taboo and you're like, okay. So Denzel's a guy who's waiting to climb. Like as soon as he drops an album that I give like a 9, he's probably in my top 10. So take it with a grain of salt. Number 16. That's I God, was the last thing this person came out with in 2022? I think it might have been because I can't remember the last time we talked about her. But this is, in my opinion, one of the greatest rappers doing it right now. This is Backwash, motherfucker.
Hell yeah.
And l- I think it's just like after the last album, it's time we stop with the qualifiers of just like, no, she's one of the greatest. I will hear no dissent at all because ever since she came onto the scene with like I really feel like that 2020 record was when everybody finally like because she had stuff like Black Sailor Moon beforehand, which are good projects, but that was the one where God has nothing to do with this, and that was the one where it was just like, oh, she's something special. Like, not only is she a queer trans rapper, she's a queer trans rapper who does not sound like anybody. Like, her commanding voice is one of the best things about her. That and the honesty. But what I love about her sound so much is that it is horrorcore out the ass. Like, I'm somebody like I fucking love shit like 3 6 Mafia. I am so sad that horrorcore is in the state that it's in today, and that by that I mean clipping is still doing it, I guess. That's about it. Like, you gotta really look for this stuff. And I know it's a very specific kind of music, but at the same time, we're horror people. Like, we talk
Yeah.
about horror literally fucking all the time. And like, she is just like, she's an amazing rapper. She has great delivery. She's such a good fucking lyricist. Like, go listen to her last record. Like that's probably my favorite of hers, the opening of which, Vibanda, where she sample flips fucking Beethoven? What? And it is the coolest. It is the coolest shit. She is amazing at being at sample flipping, basically, and she's a polymath. She's like does most of her own production work, like to the point where on "I Lie Here Buried with My Rings and My Dresses," an amazing album. That record has a beat by clipping on the album, and it's my least favorite beat on the album because she's so fucking good. Honestly, Backwash's only problem is just her level of exposure isn't nearly what it should be, and that is far outside of her control. So if you haven't heard of Backwash, fucking change that. Every single one of her projects are going to hit you like a sledgehammer. But if you're even remotely familiar with slightly heavier hip hop, I mean, hell, if you're a Denzel Curry fan, if you really like fucking Imperial, going to Backwash is going to be like fucking like whoosh, easy pipeline.
Yeah, if you're into horrorcore, Backwash is one of the few voices keeping it alive. And also another big important element of this list, something that we've already touched on a little bit, is just like the presence of queer people in hip hop has gotten so much better and
Mm-hmm.
so much more holistic. And Backwash is one of the standouts in this regard. I love what she's doing. I love what her albums speak to about gender and her personal experience. It's done in a way that is vulnerable but not always inviting, in a way that is important to reckon with. Listen to those albums. You're gonna have a good time if you're
They're all
into
good.
the heavier side of alternative music. If you're into, you're in alternative metal, or if you're just into like clipping and 3 6 Mafia, there's something in Backwash's discography for you.
I need whatever Backwash's equivalent of Brass is going to be, where she does like an album with another slightly more established creator that boosts her profile. And also because like I just feel like she would be an incredible presence to kind of switch off or hand off, the mic to in a given song. Like there's a real potential for synergy there. I'm not sure who I would pair her with these days. Like again, she would probably work well with a Griselda type person, I think really well. Like a Conway I could see doing it, Benny the Butcher I could see doing it. Like anybody who clipping has worked with, as a matter of fact, honestly. But yeah, go check out Backwash. Top 15.
Woo!
We're in it, folks. We're in it. Top 15. This is the first of the first entry I would say that like has, I don't want to say that like it is sort of like the perfect balancing point between underground and mainstream. And that is Earl Sweatshirt. Jen and I recently
Mm.
talked about Odd Future a little bit when we did our Tyler the Creator discography breakdown. Go watch that if you haven't seen it. Um, where we talk about, so how Odd Future got started. But once they broke away, the three kind of central standout stars were Tyler, Frank, and Earl. And I feel like Earl, like it took a little bit longer maybe to get going than some other people, but like once he came out with Doris, I feel like ever since then he's had a real big contingency of people that have basically like, if he moves, they're moving. But it was basically some rap songs that I feel like pushed me over the edge with him because he's got albums like I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, which I think is great because both it recognizes that if a project like that is longer than a half hour, it's probably you probably can't sit through that shit because it's heavy. It's dark. He deals in a lot of really dark subject material, like not just like depression and shit, but like, violence and what have you. Like a lot of what's interesting about the content on some rap songs, we did an episode back on that a long time ago, is the sort of content of the weight of expectations on Earl because his parents were like I'm pretty sure his mother was like a poet, and I'm pretty sure his father is like I think he's from Africa. I can't remember exactly what his father did, but he's very notable. Like two people who, if you're their child, the expectations must suck ass. And so he's going through a lot of that and how, he wants to live up to that, but like it makes his presence feel so real. His delivery is so down to earth, which makes it interesting because his production sounds like you are receiving radio waves from hell. So it's an interesting balancing act, but Earl is one of those guys where I fell in love with his music, and it wasn't for any of the reasons that I loved other hip hop artists and hip hop projects. It was just like that kind of sleepy delivery he has is a bar for entry, but at the same time, he does it so well. I don't really think he should do anything else. So like again, he's got the longevity because like he's still going, he's still making good shit. I really fucking loved Sick when it came out. That's still a really great album. I feel like not a lot of people paid as much attention to as maybe they should have. But yeah, Earl's definitely one of the modern sort of greats. Just do an album with Madlib, dude. Just do
Just
it.
do it.
Just do it.
No. And Earl is part of an interesting contingent, which I've heard Professor Sky also talk about in the past. So shout out there. But this subsect of the hip hop scene that are people that are children of academics,
Hmm.
prolific thinkers. Like Earl Sweatshirt's mom was one of the originators of critical race theory back in the 60s.
That's
This
dope
is
as fuck.
it's dope as fuck. This is a guy who has come up in a very culturally, intellectually rich in the way that you're normally meant to be expected to in this country. Context.
Yep.
Framework, right? This is a guy who has grown up very close to academia in a way
Hmm.
that hip hop has not been conducive to up until this point. And so his work reflects a kind of interesting dynamism and an interesting schism that More Mother also gets at too in a lot of her philosophy adjacent material in her own writing, in the writing that she does that accompanies her albums, things like that. And so Earl, especially as a younger person representing that sort of value, feels like somebody who is going to speak more to an explicitly politically and philosophically conscious hip hop that feels like it's continuing to evolve by the year.
No, absolutely. And to sort of compare him against, Tyler, one of his peers, is that I think the continuing sentiment we had throughout Tyler's discography was just like he's really one of a kind. He's really leading the charge and he's super unique. And he's one of those people who never had to diminish how unique he was to stay popular. And with Earl, I almost feel like it's just the same thing, but a little bit different because his audience isn't quite as far reaching as Tyler's. But at the same time, like, no one should be able to release an album like some rap songs and have it be rapturously received by everyone. Go and listen to it. It's a 20-minute long album where he's barely fucking intelligible and everyone was like, this is a masterpiece. And like, if you don't immediately get it with him, you're gonna have to come back to him later to get it at all. Like it's very strange. Like he is somebody who I would totally understand not being into because of his idiosyncrasies. That said, I just love that there's an artist working that has those idiosyncrasies because it makes
Yeah.
Earl way more interesting.
Yes, a guy with a very unique place.
Absolutely.
One that I hope continues to be very rewarding.
Absolutely. Speaking of people in a unique place, um, next up on my list is someone who is known probably way more for a group and their specific production credits, but number 14 on my list is LP. And here's the thing with LP. LP's solo albums are like better than every album he's ever worked on for someone else. Like, go listen to I'll Sleep When You're Dead. Listen to that first song when Omar and Cedric of the Mars Volta pop up on it. LP is a fucking nerd. He's a huge nerd. And that is exactly why he is number 14 on my list. Is that again, what other producer on their, One For Me album is going to think, yeah, those two guys who make that weird psychedelic punk prog, yeah, let's get them on my record. Like fucking what? And then cast aside from his solo material, which again I think is so fucking good, and that like compared to how much his other stuff is heard, you guys are sleeping on some of the best hip hop like ever made. Like if you aren't on shit like Cannibal Ox, you have to be. You have to be imperative shit, and that's not even talking about Run the Fucking Jewels. I don't need to say shit about Run the Jewels. Like Run the Jewels are one of the most like they have sustained themselves and their popularity and their potency like perfectly over this last 15-year long like stretch. It's pretty fucking crazy how like when RTJ5 is announced, people are going to lose their minds again because that's what happened when RTJ4 came out. And not to mention his production work on those albums is just fucking insane. Those are some of the most colorful, lively, and noisy beats. Like LP's production acumen it can't be understated because he is both a curator and a performer, and he's just as good at both. Like he's good friends with people like Aesop Rock, for instance, who's featured on his albums a lot. And Aesop Rock is a very comparable artist because he's very wordy. He's in it for the linguistics, but like the production still actually matters to him. But like he's got the same overlap of appeal. But with LP, there is something different that like he adds a certain spice to whatever collaboration he's going with. And he'll sort of take a back seat. He'll be like, "Oh, I'll just do producer credits for this," or "Oh, I'll just be a feature here." Like he knows when to step back, which is super important in a genre that's just, kind of rampant with egoism, which is fine for the record. I love lots of albums that are entirely about egoism, but it's a good counterpoint, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, LP. I agree with you a whole lot that he's a very underrated guy considering how much he's been able to contribute to the scene. Like, I don't think his work with Run the Jewels is as appreciated as it should be in my extremely online circles because perhaps of some gripes with the other individual. And
Capitalist Mike, yeah. Oh,
capitalist Mike, moneymaker Mike, as
he's got the
Froggy Fresh might refer to him.
he's got the unfortunate he's got the System of a Down problem where it's just like, oh, cool, the one guy in our band's a total fucking dipshit. Guess we got to deal with this if we want to make music. So that must be fun. That said, LP is somebody who like I don't know who I could credibly argue who deserves to be the best white rapper ever. But if I had to pick somebody who I was just like, yeah, it's probably them. It's probably LP. He's contributed a lot to the culture. He's done a lot of like lifting other people and smaller artists up just with his touch. Like he's the anti-Drake, and that anybody who works with him is just like, yeah, I love working with LP, and yeah, he made my career better. Cool.
Anti-Drake. But no, I see what you're going for there, and I really appreciate it. I think you're close to the mark there on that topic of conversation.
And number 13, we have Danny Brown.
Let's
No, no,
go.
no, no ceremonials necessary because Danny Brown's Danny Brown. Uh, this dude is such a fucking weirdo. He's also on here because he's a nerd, for the record. He will do some of the wildest sample flips imaginable. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, Atrocity Exhibition alone, some of those samples are fucking crazy. Like, I'm pretty sure there's a Joy Division sample on there. I'm pretty sure that there's like a fucking there's some like post-punk sample on there that's fucking crazy. But like dude is endlessly creative. And then he comes out with Atrocity Exhibition, which is just like that's the album that every artist wants to be able to make but like they have to make literally a bajillion dollars before they make it. Because like he's been on record being like, dude, Trust the Exhibition made me bankrupt. Like that album was like I put everything into it. And like
Yeah.
I hate that that was so costly for him, but at the same time, it's fucking Atrocity Exhibition. Like holy fuck. I can't exactly say I would want to live in a world without it, but
No.
Danny's got this weird thing where you hear him and he's got that high-pitched, kind of yelpy sort of voice delivery, and you hear him instantly and you're just kind of like, oh, it's kind of like when you hear gosh, trying to think of a comparable sort
It
of
it
voice
doesn't
to
feel
this.
comparable to MC Ride in terms of what's actually going on there, but the reaction feels like it comes from a similar place.
If I can hop genres, honestly, the voice immediately has the same effect on me. Like if I don't have previous context, the voice has the same amount of effect on me as like shit, I just had it and then I forgot it. Oh no, it was Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins, where you hear his voice instantly and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. However, if you're able to get past that, Danny is one of the most idiosyncratic artists alive, and he is also one of the most talented. Like, he will come onto a verse and he will say that verse like no one else doing it, which is valuable in and of itself. But like, he's somebody who his perspective is really valuable. He came into the game much, much later than everybody else did. Like, Triple X came out when he was 30. So, that's a first of all, what a project to arrive on the scene with. But also, he's somebody who's got experience and can sort of speak to that experience, and even from a sort of sagely kind of perspective. So some of his more introspective work is just sort of him like burrowing inward and talking about that. His last album was very much that. Quaranta, which again, that's an album that like that got paid dust, and it's a great.
God, I'm so upset. I was upset about this for months that I don't know what it was. Was it the tide of scaring the hose? Was it I don't know. But
It
the lack of love
probably
that Quaranta received pretty much across the board frustrated me to no end because I immediately really clicked with that album.
Yeah, it's like it is definitely an album where he's a lot more straight-laced, but he's also unearthing facets of himself that he never really got to fully show before. But like when you go back though and you listen to something like Atrocity Exhibition and you listen to those beats that are produced by people like Black Milk or something, and you'll hear like Really Doe, for instance, is like the greatest assembly of featured artists on any song ever. I
Oh
mean,
my
it's just like
God.
you've got Kendrick, you've got Earl, you've got Danny, you've got like it's fucking nuts. And those so and lest we forget that we're talking about how weird he is. Part of the appeal of Atrocity Exhibition is just that it fucking bangs. Like that shit is so fucking hard. I want to say that like I don't think that there is a hip hop song not by Kendrick Lamar in the 2010s that has as much collective love as what's the fuck the absolutely crazy song on Atrocity
Are
Exhibition.
you talking about
The
Ain't It Funny?
Ain't It Funny, the one with the
Yeah.
music video directed by Jonah Hill. I don't think that Ain't It Funny is holding any esteem other than the benchmark for the form. Like he's weird, but he's personable, and also like he's got this kind of wisdom to him. And I mean, again, he's working with JPEG Mafia now, so he's clearly versatile in a way that people probably didn't give him credit for beforehand. But like, yeah,
Right.
insanely creative. He's awesome.
If you want to talk about versatility, he's been on his podcast talking about how much he loves hyperpop, and so he did a feature
Yep.
recently with this group called Frost Children on
Hmm.
the song called "Shake It Like a" that came out a few months ago. That's really good, and I just want to hear him on hyperpop songs forever.
Oh
I
God, yeah.
it's such a great combination. It sounds right off of Atrocity Exhibition when he hops onto that kind of a beat.
Yeah. Also, you know what I'm saying? Very underrated follow-up to Atrocity Exhibition. That's just like that's Danny's funniest album. Like it's a
Yes.
hoot and a half to listen to. Um, Pivoting Starkly from Danny Brown is a pick that I rarely ever see on lists like this. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it on a list. And I get it, it's not as popular and it's not accessible. But for number 12, I have MC Dalek of Dalek. And if you're unfamiliar with them, they are the progenitors of industrial hip hop. They are the guys who sort of began kind of mixing those heavy, sort of repetitive elements and then just putting that at the forefront of the music. So sometimes it goes understated as to what a great poet MC Dalek actually is. Take one listen to Absence, and it's like this is some like more mother level of breaking down societal systemic issues in like such a granular fashion that I can only call it artful. Uh, and not to mention like the production that backs this up is always just the most intense shit ever. But to me, the more I listen to it, the more like an album like From Filthy Tongues of Gods and Griots, which is often held up as being like that's like the Citizen Kane of industrial hip hop right there. It's like everybody who makes that kind of music, that's the album they'll point to. I'm pretty sure Backwash has basically said as much. So again, if you have overlap with any of the people I'm talking about, go check them out. But Dalek is just a guy who has kind of everything and suffers from the fact that his music is just so fucking abrasive. He's never gonna get the kind of play that anyone else on here is. But that said, oh, he's unignorably fantastic and consistent as well. Like, I think the funny thing about them is that there's a point at which some of their albums start to be a little bit more samey and like less unique. But Dalek is never a reason why. He's always on point. Like it's usually the production that'll let them down in some of those later albums. But yeah, he's peerless basically in my opinion.
Yeah, give that industrial hip hop a go. I'm sorry, that Dalek is a complete blind spot for me.
And
So
that
we're in
is
an interesting place right now.
and that is precisely why I included him because he should be on more lists. So honestly, that works. Oh boy, we're almost in the top 10. So now everyone gets to get mad at me because of this next pick that is not in the top 10.
Get in the comments.
My fiance just said if they get mad at you, I'll kick their fucking ass. So you heard it first, bitch. Um, number 11 is MF Doom. I don't want to
Okay.
hear shit about me not putting MF Doom high enough because MF Doom made me fall in love with the art form. Like I don't value his music the way I value anyone else's. Um, and I've talked at length about Doom before. Like he tragically passed in late 2020, I believe, but we only found out in early 2021, same week as we lost Sophie. Jesus fucking Christ, what an awful fucking week that
That
was.
was New Year's Eve that news hit the internet that Doom was gone.
Ugh, that was an awful start to that year. Fuck.
Uh, yeah.
Um, so that happened, but we covered things like Vaudeville Villain, one of my favorite projects by MF Doom. But that was unfortunate because in that project, I was kind of the only one who really dug it. Everyone else is kind of like, eh. So I was like, ah, we should have done Mad Villainy instead. That said, I still love Vaudeville Villain, but like MF Doom is the guy that like once you've listened to enough Eminem to realize that you like hip hop and want to listen to more than just an angry white man screaming about how much he wants to kill his ex-wife, then you go to somebody like MF Doom. And Doom is great because he's like immediately you're just like this guy's vocabulary is so much denser than mine and I'm a writer and like you'll have to go and like he rhymes shit with like the Icelandic volcano Iron of Joe Cool. He manages to rhyme the craziest shit in the world. But the thing is that he never lets that's never at the forefront of his craft. It's always just kind of a side effect of what a great concise writer he was. He was also like conscious, but he wasn't like, he wasn't preachy, but he's also really personable and he has that kind of supervillain side, that kind of persona that he gets to play into. It's just like everything that a rapper can be and can do, MF Doom like did it. He's got so many production credits. He's got so many great projects under so many different names. It's like I can turn on basically any MF Doom album that isn't Venomous Villain. And the only reason I isolate Venomous Villain is because like half of the verses on that album are not him. So that is precisely why it's not as good as its predecessor. But like, yeah, you don't need to tell me how great MF, or I don't need to tell you how great MF Doom is. Everybody listening obviously already knows he's the GOAT for like most people in the know, but weirdly enough does not show up on a lot of these lists. Like, unless you're an internet person, then he's probably there. But like, as somebody who doesn't get as much respect in the mainstream, it's like, it's like I know that it's in conversations people tend to be like, oh, Mad Villainy can, maybe it's a little overrated. And it's just like, well, okay, firstly, you're wrong. Secondly, fucking like listen to it until you get it, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
No, I've got it over my shoulder there for a reason. Mad Villainy, MF Doom in general. I like you have a deep infatuation with his catalog. He is one of the people that got me really interested in how hip hop works from a technical perspective. And again, he's just a guy who's extremely quotable, is always extremely listenable. You're never in a wrong mood to just put on some MF Doom and ride for a little bit. And an insanely talented vocalist, an insanely talented writer, a just a great personality. Like his presence on Adult Swim, like that's a
Yeah.
thing that is maybe, I don't know. I have a weird relationship with Adult Swim.
No, I do too. I found so much formative media through Adult Swim, so much that I'm only just now realizing it's just like my favorite work of fiction I saw on Adult Swim. Then it was just like all of the things that shaped my taste I watched on Adult Swim. All of the music I listened to, it began with listening stuff that I knew about because of Adult Swim. And I'm like, oh, that show that I stayed awake for every night at midnight actually like changed the course of my life.
Right, and that's definitely true. But I think where this tension is coming from that I've been unable to speak to this point is just I feel like there's a stagnation in certain online circles for wanting that kind of
Oh yeah.
to still be around. The Adult Swim, the Toonami, the cultural clashing going on there, what have you. And just like that was there when it was for a reason, and now it's a good thing that we don't need it to be like that. You know, we have ways to get this kind of weird stuff in a mainstream way now. So I don't need as much Adult Swim nostalgia as I think there is out there in the world. But that all that to be said, to wrap it back around to the actual topic at hand, Doom and his ability to exist in so many different kind of cultural pockets with the kind of work that he was doing is I hope going to be a big factor in his continued longevity as an important figure for the genre.
When he was alive, other than his many monikers, what he was known as was your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. And frankly, that's just fucking true. He's like he's like just amazing enough right before the line of being like lyrical miracle. Like he stops centimeters short of being that kind of rapper, and that is exactly his appeal. It's like him and Aesop Rock. They are this like those are, in my opinion, the two giants of abstract hip hop. Like those two guys in the mid 2000s were ruling that world. And naturally I was there and I was enjoying it. Um Raps niches, telling on their business,
Known as the grimy, limey,
fooling around.
slimy, try me, blimey.
Rappers be their own star witness. Do you see the perpetrator? Yeah, I'm right here. Go listen to Rap Snitch Niches. That's the greatest beat of all time. All right. Fuck it. Top 10, bitch. All right, let's
Top
do it.
10.
Top 10. Uh very funny that we go from this to that in one successive point. But number 10 is Little Sims.
Let's
Uh in
go.
my opinion, the best female MC working today, and that is no small feat considering her competition's pretty fucking stiff, frankly. Like commercially, even like the biggest voice in hip hop right now that isn't Kendrick is Megan Thee Stallion. And we've got people like Rico Nasty who are also here, and Tierra Whack is also a great choice. You got More Mother, you got Backwash. Like there is
Shout
a
out Dochi. Shout out Glorilla.
Doichi is also like, she's having her come up, and I really, really hope she stays around because I love Doichi stuff. But to me, like I agree with Kendrick Lamar. She's one of the best doing it right now. And a lot of it does have to do with the fact that Sometimes I Might Be Introvert came out and just like exploded. Like that album came out and it was like that for that year was what people were looking for instead of a new Kendrick album. They were like, well, I got this, so I can't really be too mad about it. Like I still can't believe shit on this record where like the horns on the introvert, the
Ugh.
that is one of the biggest sounding songs of this decade so far. This is like the answer to like I don't think a hip hop song has sounded this big since Kanye made Power. Like this song is it will level mountains. The best part about it though is Little Sims because man, bar for bar, like she's got the same set of strengths that I'd say somebody like Kendrick does. She's an amazing storyteller. She's just like really great at speaking on her own issues, her own thought process, and just like the things that affect her. There's so much content on Simbi that's like about her relationship with the like her family and how like these events have happened to her and how like she's sort of being like her last album is just like she's very aware that she's kind of being used by the music industry and she's sort of like using that as a way to comment on it, which is very smart and I appreciate a lot. But I hope that just doesn't end up harming her longevity because she stayed in the conversation since then. Because No Thank You, which is, I mean, basically a B-sides album, and that shit rules. Like, it's a really solid release that I feel like anyone else, that would be their banner release for the year. But like, when it comes to flows and lyricism, I really can't ask for a lot more than I do with Little Sims. Frankly, the only reason she's not higher is that her discography is just not big enough yet. Like, she's willing to take risks on shit like that EP last year, but like, I just need like one or two more records from her, and then I'm like, yes, you're a goat.
Yeah, Simbi hit in ways that only few hip hop albums do. It's this giant double album with a lot of different influences from jazz, from Afro beats, and I felt like it instantly took off. It came out the same weekend as Donda. I remember watching
Yep.
your all's episode talking about both of those albums, and Simbi is by far the one that I think about more every day since then. And
Doesn't that
it's
suck
one
though that fucking Kanye and Drake had to do their fucking dick measuring contest the same day that Simbi dropped? It's like, I know that Simbi was still successful, but like this album deserved success so much fucking more than Donda or whatever the fuck garbage Drake put out. Like it just, I'm sorry, it just does. Like
No, you're right.
Donda's not an album I hate for the record, but it's just like, take away the cult personality from Kanye. Who fucking cares? Simbi is where it's at, man. And I didn't
This
get
is
a
where it's
chance to
at.
say that because talking about Donda made me so fucking drunk it gave me brain damage. Go back and watch that episode. You're like, I can't believe he walked away alive.
I texted you while I was watching that episode for the first time, being like, I don't know if I should ask if you're okay.
I'm glad we had adequate Emily on the show that week so that someone could fill the space for me because I was just sitting there like,
When the segment starts and you turn that bottle of wine upside down, I was jumping on my couch. I was like,
well,
this is gonna be good. But no,
uh, thank you, Simbi.
Simbi and No Thank You and Drop Seven, all amazing projects that you are gonna want to catch up on, especially in preparation for whatever is about to come next. I
I
am
just she needs
I
to be
am
given unlimited money. She
I am
should just be
all
able to do
in on Little Sims as one of our defining hip hop artists of the decade.
that'll do it. Number 9 on my list. If we're talking who is the best rapper, just like point blank, period, who is it? It's Black Thought. It's like
Here
no
we
questions.
go.
Like you don't even have to ask me. There's not a debate. It's just like who is the best at rapping? It's Black Thought. Like my deep dive into the Roots last year was one of the most valuable discography experiences I've had in some time, just because the Roots are like a group that are so heavily canonized, they're almost taken for granted. And, not to mention it sucks that they're just known for being the late night band now. So their cachet has diminished pretty significantly, coupled with the fact that they haven't really released an album since I think like 2012 or something like that. And their last album is like handily their worst. But everything before that, that's just one of the best discographies in music. You don't need the qualifier of hip hop. I mean, good goddamn. They've got Illadelph Half-Life, they've got fucking Things Fall Apart, they've got my personal favorite and one of my favorite albums of all time, Game Theory. Um, it's difficult to understate the impact of Black Thought in the sense that he's kind of an MF Doom of like he's your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. It's just that I would stick the your favorite conscious rapper's favorite conscious rapper, which I'm not trying to say like, oh, he's big and important because he's a conscious rapper. I'm just saying that like his lane of hip hop is very distinctly that. And I
Yeah.
would argue that basically nobody does it better. Like the Roots are an amazing band, and they have an amazing array of instrumentalists working for them that make that live band sound so fucking like warm and crisp and inviting to listen to. But if you don't have Black Thought, the whole thing just collapses. Like you need him as like he's in the sense he's kind of like a big boy, the more fundamental aspect, so you can balance it with everything else. It's just that he's the only technical vocal performer most of the time. But like whenever he shows up as a guest feature, you know that shit's gonna be fucking heat. When he was on that Freddie Gibbs mixtape, for instance, he's excellent on there. I'm trying to think his solo album, Cheat Codes. That was a huge album when that came out. The last sort of verse we've gotten from MF Doom so far, which is absolutely fucking excellent. There's just no where like I don't even have that much to say about Black Thought because he doesn't lack anything. He's just the best at all of it.
Yeah, I don't feel the need to excessively justify inclusions for folks like Black Thought and some folks I'm sure we're going to get to as we get further up the list. I'm just going to be like, yeah, you know why.
Yeah, it's just
Let's
like
move on.
go listen to Game Theory and tell me I'm wrong.
But Black Thought does, yeah, the Roots' music deserves to be spoken about with a little bit more respect than I
Yeah.
think it is.
And
Uh,
but it doesn't hurt that all of their like really big albums are like really long. Like Things Fall Apart, I'm pretty sure is like approaching 90 minutes, and I'm pretty sure
yeah,
Philadelphia Half-Life is at least 80. So like that's a barrier for entry. Guys, Game Theory's 50 minutes. Go listen to it right now.
Cheat Codes
We
isn't that long either. If you want
no,
something
in
more
fact,
recent, that
listen to both because you get a great contemporary and a great classic. There you go.
exactly. If you want to get started, that's where to go. Cheat Codes proves that Black Thought still has a lot of great energy in him that's going to make a lot of great music. And I
I
want to
hope
see
it's
what he does
not the
next.
last we hear from him. I would really like another project where he like teamed up with another producer to really kind of. I'm not sure who. I mean, like Madlib is always an obvious pull for basically anybody, but like Black Thought very uniquely would work well over jazz samples. So, anything's possible. I really hope we get more from him.
Yes.
That said, his catalog is so robust that I won't complain. Um, Number eight, the second half of the duo that I mentioned earlier. This is Andre 3000. Uh, this is kind of another guy where it's just like, dude, it's Andre. Like Andre's
No.
one of the most eminently likable presences in all of music. Like whenever he's doing an interview, he is just a guy. Like he'll show up in fucking Claire Denise High Life and just be like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking fuck around with some plants on here. And he's like a really great actor. He shows up and it's just like he always has charisma. He's always memorable no matter like how big his role is. But like as a musical force, it's very evident that he was always like a great rapper, a great lyricist from the get-go. And then when you have them do their double album where it's basically one side is mostly Big Boy and one side is mostly Andre, that's the point at which you realize it's like, oh, Andre isn't just like a great rapper. Andre wants to be a great artist in the sense
Mm.
that like Andre wants to be Prince on an album like this. And that includes all of the sort of instrumental acumen, vivaciousness, just the kind of sound that he was playing with. It's very comparable, but Andre's the guy who like it's like what if the weirder member of the duo was the more popular one, which is usually never true. Like it's always, the guy who's the face of it and then the other guy who's the weirdo. And this is if the weirdo was sort of the front man. And I really respect and love that a lot about him. He definitely knows when to let go of the reins. And he'll make some nice ambient flute music every once in a while. That's neat too. But it's the performance and the charisma. Like think about a song like Hey Ya. Like that is a song that is entirely carried on Andre's shoulders as being a blast of woo! And then you look at the lyrics and you're like, oh, this is about how love is finite and how we will all eventually die.
Shake
Cool.
it like a Polaroid pic.
Shake it, shake it, shake it like a Polaroid picture. And he's so good at hooks. Dude is like,
Yeah.
that's why when everyone is like, dude, an Andre 3000 feature, like when he comes on fucking a Frank Ocean song, that shit's about to be fucking flames, dude. So I mean, yeah, it's fucking Andre. Like I of all of the people that are placed in the top tens of all these stupid fucking lists, he's the one who I'm like, I feel like you deserve to be there the most. Like he's so creative, he's got such a great discography, he's so multi-talented, he's everything you want.
Yeah, he's everything you want in a performer. He's everything you want in an artist, because that I feel like is a line in the sand that has existed for some time between the MC and artist. There was that
Hmm.
Vince Staples tweet that was like, so is this going to be less of a rap album, more of an art album? And he was like, that's really racist, dude. And that's how I feel sometimes when I'm talking about this. But there really is something about Andre. I mean, it doesn't hurt this perception of him that his last album was such a diversion and that so many old heads are kind of clowning on him for the pivot instead of like really giving it a shot when it's
Hmm.
clearly more what he's interested in and what he wants to do. Whereas I am more, and I hope I continue to be the kind of person that wants to follow an artist and I'm passionate about anywhere that they go. And
Absolutely.
Andre has been one of the greatest recent tests of the limits of that philosophy for most people, and a lot of them are fucking it up.
Yep.
So I want to also kind of put my flag in the hill for Andre, even though I'm not as familiar with the discography and he didn't ultimately make my list. Just being able to sit here and talk about it, I'm like, yeah, this is a guy that even though I'm not as familiar with his oeuvre, I would easily go bat for as being a very interesting persona.
Just make sure you ignore some choice lines in those first two Outcast albums. It's just just they were
I
teenagers.
believe you
Let's
don't
just
like
let's
him.
give them a bit of grace. Um Another stark pivot here. We're going from some of the most prolific hit makers in the genre to someone who has never and will never approach having a successful song on that level. But number seven for me, Aesop Rock. If you ask me who the second best rapper of all time is behind Black Thought, it's Aesop Rock. Mainly because this dude loves language more than most people love anything. This guy is for Aesop Rock is a rapper for writers because this dude's vocabulary is so fucking insane that like I have used Google multiple times for multiple songs to be like I've never fucking heard that word before. I have literally written 200,000 word novels and there are still words where I'm just like what the fuck did he just mean by that? But that said, I'm never one to shy away from a challenge, and Aesop Rock at his densest can be challenging, but he's also so fucking funny, man. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've put on songs from The Impossible Kid and, like, I just laugh along because there's so many fun little stories. This is a guy who made a fucking song about his cat, about how his therapist told him to get a cat, and the whole song is about how the cat is kind of a little shit and, like, pees on stuff and then gets in the hamper. And it's like, this is so fucking adorable, but also, like, these are bars somehow? What? And The Impossible Kid is still probably my favorite of his, one of my favorite rap albums just ever. Mainly because of the beat choices. Like he's somebody who, like in the front half of his career, it's abstract hip hop that's very rickety sounding. It's very piecemeal. It's very much what you would expect from that scene. But the thing I love about Aesop Rock is that on the Impossible Kid, he pivots to a really, really digital sound. Like every beat on that album sounds like it was made in a computer, and everything he made before that doesn't sound like that. But that became one of his most successful, if not his most successful album. And it's kind of crazy that that happened. I figured that most people would, deem it kind of an awkward collision. But since I loved it so much, I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking complain. And you want to talk about consistency? Holy fuck! Like since
Man.
day one, this guy has been putting them out day in, day out. This man is in the booth. This man is writing down his pen. He's conceptual occasionally, like on his last album, which I can't
Integrated
remember
Tech
the, yeah,
Solutions.
Integrated Tech Solutions, which is an album that we've actually talked about at length on the show. One of the best fucking hip hop albums, if not the best of that particular year, showing off all the things that Aesop Rock has always been good at. Balancing humor, emotional sincerity, and like genuine societal critiques, which have become more and more salient as the years have gone by. Like, The Impossible Kid is an album that's really mainly centered on him, but with Integrated Tech Solutions and Spirit World Field Guide, it feels like he's branching outward a little bit. He's kind of using the world as kind of a cipher to address his own issues on a more macro level. And I really respect that. And he's just very fun to listen to. I can completely understand why people wouldn't get along with him just because like the way he mixes his voice is that, you have to be able to hear every word he says. So it's very high in the mix. So it can kind of agitate you if you're just kind of prone to a more smooth listening experience. But with me, I need that to be able to hear the man so I can understand him. He is like technically basically unparalleled. He's like LP if LP got like a magic Mario mushroom and did the blip, blip, blip. That's that's Aesop Rock.
A dude who thinks the dictionary is his instrument.
Uh-huh. Damn straight. Damn straight. Um, well, last entry that is not the top five.
Oh dear.
And I'm glad this entry is here because I don't quite think it deserves the top five for one specific reason. You'll probably know it as soon as I say who this is. But people who have been paying attention to my music opinions, all six of you, will probably have been like, I wonder when this name is going to show up. And here we are, number six, McKinley Dixon. McKinley
Yes.
Dixon is the
I've been waiting for
most
this one.
exciting artist in hip hop right now. The only reason he is not in my top five is because he has two albums. He has two albums and two mixtapes. And in order for me to put you a little bit higher, I just need more. I need more because I need you to show that you're more consistent, that you've got the longevity and whatever. But the thing is that I have no reason to think that McKinley Dixon will do anything but that. Like he's a more independent artist and he's very grassroots. So, his albums take time. So obviously you gotta wait. And when you hear a McKinley Dixon album, you're like, oh, that's why it took so long to make. Because this production's fucking incredible. That live jazz band, almost again, roots-esque sound is so fun. Like he is able to like on my favorite hip hop album of the decade so far, For My Mama and Anyone Who Looked Like Her. He's got a song like Brown Shoulders where he basically fucking morphs into Anderson .Paak for one song and it's like, "Whoa, this is so fucking sick." And then he's got songs like fucking like the first two songs actually on For My
Chain
Mama
so
are
heavy.
Chain So Heavy, man. Like this guy knows how to do a hook. He knows how to make it catchy. But then, like by the end of the album, like when you've got songs like Twist My Hair and shit, where he's talking about like deeper problems that have to do with him and his community. This is like listening to McKinley Dixon is like listening to Kendrick Lamar in 2015, except instead of trying to save the world, McKinley Dixon is trying to save like his apartment complex. He's trying to save his city block. He's trying to save, his cousins who live two streets over because he's, tired of seeing them toil away in such a shitty fucking existence. But he's also somebody who's like, you've got songs that are, you might think that they take like a darker angle, but it's more motivating than anything else. He's so inspirational and he's so cognizant of the fact that his voice can carry meaning, but also is simultaneously very afraid of that as well. Like, this is Kendrick Lamar if he had more reticence about being Kendrick Lamar. Again, in 2015, specifically, like, McKinley Dixon is a window into a universe where To Pimp a Butterfly was actually his most successful album. Like, that, it's like we're peeking into a universe that we never actually got. And then, like, that's the best way I could put my appeal of McKinley. But like, he's somebody who he can do it all. And he has, like, yes, his sound isn't unique per se, but for 2025, it sure fucking is. Like, it's rare that people are even able to do live band settings at all, let alone to back up your hip hop production. That shit takes time and effort and work, and it shows through in the final product. I really can't say enough great things about McKinley Dixon.
Right. He's carrying the torch that things like Things Fall Apart and
Mm-hmm.
T-Pab began, which is a real kinship between old-fashioned hip hop and old-fashioned jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't let the computers mess with the meshing of it. Get a rapper, get a jazz band, and just do it. And that's his philosophy, and he makes great stuff out of it. I mean, yeah, we were talking about Chain So Heavy a little bit. Make a Poet Black, his kind of manifesto of being afraid of his own potential,
Uh-huh.
is one of my favorite songs of the decade. And let's not forget about Beloved Paradise Jazz either.
Yes.
His follow up to that, which is very inspired by obviously the works of Toni Morrison, begins with an excerpt of a friend of his reading an excerpt from Paradise, and is very informed by Morrison's own commitment to portraying struggle in very specific geography, right? And I appreciated really what you were saying about he's a very locally focused writer. He sees his surroundings and sees a whole world that needs saving. Like there's that song on Beloved Paradise Jazz, Live from the Kitchen Table.
Ah,
That's
so
all
good.
about, you've got one verse, it's all about him as kind of this patriarch narrating stories of past violences that he wants his children to live beyond. And then Gais Guevara, another
Mm-hmm.
rapper who is on his way to making it high onto a list like this, um, comes in and has his own story about encountering a friend's history with incarceration and his own kind of survivor's guilt, bystander effect reaction to feeling a disconnect because of that time that was taken from him and his friend and their kinship, their relationship. One of the best songs of the decade, and you can find many of those in Dixon's two albums so far. If there's a guy who I would say confidently is going to shape the way that hip hop should be going in certain respects, it's him and it's the influences that he's carrying with him.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Fucking, like, and not to mention, you got Beloved Paradise Jazz. You got a song like Run, 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 which,
Yeah,
I mean, dude is so good at writing fun, catchy songs. Like, you'll get like at least two songs on every album where you're like, fucking the piano lead at the beginning of Run, 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 the that melody is so fucking complicated and he weaves it like it's fucking nothing. Like, Jesus Christ. Ah. So now that
Protective
we have our
Styles on For My Mama also has that same appeal, where it's like it's such a great hook, but such a complex melody. Oh, I
so
adore
good.
it.
Now that we've gotten our obligatory McKinley Dixon glazing out of the way. Top five, everybody. It's top
Top
five.
five.
Who's my top five? All right. This is an easy one because the first one, top five, it's Tyler. Tyler the Creator.
Great.
Um, we don't have to say a whole lot because we said literally everything there is to be said about Tyler the Creator in the last video we did together. So go check that out if you want more specific thoughts. But like as an abridged version of that, I said something in that video that I think is the best encapsulation of Tyler the Creator. That being that he is someone who, in a world where everyone has to make themselves less interesting to be more popular, he has never compromised and only become more interesting and still managed to become popular just because he's that fucking good at it. Like, he's an artist who I would breathlessly place in my top five, despite the fact that his first half of his career just eh. Like so those
Eh,
albums are just like, they're fine, but they're not ones I'm gonna come back to. But like just the run of Flower Boy Forward, this is he is in fact that guy. There is nothing he
shout out
can't
to that
do
song, which
and
came out
nothing
after
he
we
isn't
recorded that
incredible
episode.
at. What now?
I said, shout out to that guy since it came out after we recorded that episode.
Exactly. How fucking fortuitous. But like it's still so fucking true. Like it's I don't know of many people like it's also considered like I know he just put out his maturation record, but all things considered, it's like Tyler's a member of the new guard. Like he's probably at the forefront of the new guard, but like there's nobody who's kind of following in his stead. He is in his own lane, and like this is a world where if you don't pick a lane, you're not gonna be driving. But yet Tyler just decided to build a road and it works.
Yeah. Um, Everything I need to say about Tyler, I've already said in the last video, but I'll add this little nugget again to connect back to what I said about Backwash, which is a guy who is pushing the limits for queerness in hip hop, for gender and sexual expression in hip hop is fucking important. And so much of Chromacopia is about that. I feel
Hmm.
like that's still not a thing that's being talked about enough, is the way
Hmm.
that he was able to talk about his feelings about relationships, his feelings about his own sexuality, how that connects to every other struggle that's gone on in his life and in his artistic past is something that I really, really value. He's such an individual, but he knows how to work that into music that feels resonant for somebody, frankly, for somebody like me that does not live the normal life in a lot of ways.
No. I, that's what's I think I was about to say what's most impressive, but like there's no single aspect about him that is more impressive than anything else. That said, uh with Tyler, I guess it's more like because he's on the younger side, it's like looking to him is sort of as a vanguard still can reassure you that hip hop is still headed in a direction where, capitalism isn't pushing it in. And in a day and age where it is increasingly difficult to even find the spotlight cast on you, it takes a certain amount of bravery to just kind of do whatever you want and not care about the consequences. Like he's a little shit about it, sure. But if that's the sacrifice we got to make for it, then that's the sacrifice we got to make for it, I guess.
May I, before number four, run through a couple of my own that I don't think are going to pop up in your
Go
top
go
five?
for, I know one big one that I left off my list and I was like, Jen's definitely going to talk about him and I need to too. So
Okay, well, I want to start at the top alphabetically just to get one out of the way that I don't feel the need to defend super egregiously. I got really into Notorious B.I.G.'s big releases very early on in my
Mhm.
love affair with hip hop, and when I say no list is complete without him, I mean it. But I don't feel like I need to
Juicy,
say
the
all that
most
much to
classic
justify
of
it.
all classics.
Yeah, the most classic of all classics, and same kind of appeal, although I'll have a bit more to say about that with my next one that I want to shout out, which is actually Nas.
Yeah,
I
yeah. Nas, great shout, great shout.
I have a big love for Nas's first two albums, and I have a big love for Nas's most recent projects, especially Magic. I think is really, really good. I love the King's Disease trilogy as a concept more than I love some of it in
Yeah.
execution, but there's no rapper of his caliber and of his history that's doing that kind of work right now. And that's a thing that I am always going to get behind, even if
Mhm.
every individual moment maybe doesn't always work for me. There's stuff on all three of the King's Disease albums. I'm just like, yeah, this is classic shit. I'm not going to want to live without this.
I think you and I would probably agree that if you took the best tracks from the King's Disease trilogy and just made it into one album, it would probably be like a legitimately great record. Um, that said, I mean, like Nas is not on my list purely because I wanted to exclude Nas and Jay from my list because they're on
And I
everyone's.
understand that impulse. I didn't feel
Exactly.
the
Like
need to do that.
he'd probably make it in like the mid-teens for me, like more than likely.
And to go back to a couple Wu Tang members, I want to shout out
Hmm.
the OGs, RZA and GZA both made it
Hmm.
onto my list, and here's why. I obviously ODB made my list as well, and those three made it for particular reasons. One, because ODB is easily the brightest personality
Hmm.
of the ensemble in many respects. And so not having him on here felt like I was doing a disservice. But GZA, I do feel like I have to justify a slight bit because
Yeah.
GZA is not normally a person that you see on these lists. But as I went through the early Wu-Tang, the debut album 36 Chambers and all the solo albums, which I've listened to a handful of, there's nobody that rides RZA's production better than GZA. And you hear that on
Yeah.
Liquid Swords. You hear that on all of his guest appearances and all the other records. You hear that on 36 Chambers. Those two as producer and MC have a synergy unlike anybody else in the group. And frankly, unlike anybody else, we've talked about like Freddie Gibbs and Madlib. We've
Mhm.
talked about Madvillain. We've talked about cheat codes and RZA and GZA and the work that they put into stuff like Liquid Swords definitely deserves to be seen as in that same caliber when maybe it isn't. I think like it's just a little bit underrated.
I, I would agree. I also RZA, thank you for the Kill Bill soundtrack. I really like that one.
Hell yeah. And as long as I'm shouting out classics, this is the only one that I really rigorously listened to in preparation for this list because
Hmm.
I thought I need to solidify my take on this. That's Ice Cube.
Ah, okay. I like that pick actually.
Yeah, I mean, I went back and listened. I went back to Straight Outta Compton, which I've loved for years, but one thing I hadn't ever done was gotten into Ice Cube's solo work. And
Hmm.
so around the time of the new year this year, when we started talking about doing this, I was listening to a ton of Ice Cube solo albums, and I got a ton of great experiences out of those first three records. And that's not to say it doesn't come with some warts. Part of the reason that it took me so long to get to Ice Cube's music, especially like stuff like Death Certificate, was particularly controversial
Hmm.
takes on them that have been floating around. But I knew in a world where we defend the re-exhumation of stuff like Tron Cat, that I
Hmm.
needed to at least give Death Certificate a spin
Hmm.
to see how I would feel. And I got a lot out of it. And I don't know. I found that I really like Ice Cube, and that's the thing that really surprised me.
I feel like that there's like of the rappers who were popular in his era, he is kind of put to the side, and I think that's a little unfair. So I actually agree with you. I would say that in a modern context, Ice Cube a hair underrated, just a hair.
Yeah, we don't really talk about America's Most Wanted maybe as much as we should,
Yeah.
because obviously, I mean, you have his third album would have a lot more of the crossover hits. Today was a good day,
Hmm.
etc. But there's a lot of love to be found in those first two albums, and so I don't think that's a thing that should go overlooked. And one more that I want to shout out, and then I'm going to hand it back to you
Hmm.
because I don't think this made its way onto your list, and I want to see how you react to it.
Okay.
Is where'd it go? Is MCA.
Oh, okay. I thought for certain that one of these picks was going to be Jid.
Hold that thought. Well, that's one of those that was like maybe it'll come up, so I'll save it for later. But let's talk about MCA. So I am a huge Beastie Boys head. I love pretty much every Beastie Boys album. But if I had to pick one from the trio, my cat keeps sitting on my keyboard, and I really hope something doesn't go wrong. If I have to pick one from the trio, it's MCA, no questions asked. This is a guy who I've always felt is the most like, or was the most technically proficient of the trio. He has a really standout vocal delivery that really works well against the other two members. And as the group continued to mature, MCA was the one that went in the most eccentric directions. I'm thinking about my favorite Beastie Boys album from a holistic perspective is Ill Communication, mainly because of MCA's lyrical contributions, especially when he gets to ride solo on the stuff like The Message, which is all about
Oh yeah.
him talking about climate change. And that was, excuse me, around the time that he was getting very involved with Buddhism, taking a political stance against persecution of Tibetan monks, which led to the Free Tibet concert. Very influential for the group, very influential for a lot of different groups that were prominent at the time. And so I feel like if I wanted to bring in the Beastie Boys, MCA was the way to go. I don't know. Tell me what you think about this
I
inclusion.
I actually love this inclusion because it's sort of representative of a sect of hip hop that I won't say has been forgotten. Like the Beastie Boys stuff that is classic still holds up, and I feel like a lot of people will still tell you that. But in terms of like specific albums, aside from probably Paul's Boutique, honestly, the, their whole catalog is probably kind of underrated now. Just because I feel like these days you can look at the Beastie Boys from an outside perspective and wrongly kind of assume that they're sort of a relic of their time. But no, those albums like hold up. Like big blind spot for me. I've only heard Paul's Boutique in full. That said, I've definitely heard a lot more Beastie Boys in my time listening to music. But like from that, the merit of that album alone, I feel like you should secure your place in hip hop history because that's a one that's like the performances are fantastic on it, but like just how that record is assembled is so ahead of its time. Like
Right.
so ahead of its time.
We wouldn't have a lot of what we got today without Paul's Boutique. Just the blatant act of sampling whatever you think will sound good and letting the budget carry you forward is an ethos that would, I mean, define a lot of what hip hop would end up becoming, which is not just, flipping soul samples, but
Mhm.
just taking whatever you want and just run with it. And they started that ethos with Paul's Boutique in a way that I think is really interesting. But you're also doing yourself a disservice if you're not listening to stuff like Ill Communication and Hello Nasty, at the very least, are standout releases of theirs. License to Ill obviously still has their most iconic work. It's definitely not my favorite album of theirs. They're as they become as they become a bit more seasoned, they get a lot more interesting in terms of the directions that they're willing to go and the kind of music that they're willing to make. So get deeper into the Beastie Boys catalog if all you know is what's on the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtracks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then go watch that scene in Guardians 3 again, set to fucking uh fucking god damn it. What the hell is that
No
song?
Sleep Till
No
Brooklyn.
Sleep Till Brooklyn, yeah. Go watch that scene again because it still rips. Okay. Number 4. I kind of did a last minute swap like yesterday of my 3 and 4, but I feel more confident now.
Okay.
But 4 is Billy Woods. Uh,
Yes.
Billy Woods, I feel like when you talk about a contemporary artists and when you talk about contemporary rappers, no, like I know I started this off by saying that, arbitrary placements are stupid and we shouldn't do them, but like I do feel like if you're in the know about hip hop and Billy Woods isn't at like on your list anywhere, something will feel wrong to me. There is a disturbance in the force and I do not care for it because Billy Woods is like he's the guy right now. Like this is what it must have felt like to grow up and see the artistic progression of Aesop Rock because he's the only rapper who is as technically skilled as Billy, who also has as many great albums over as many years as he does. Like Billy Woods has actually been like really prolific since like 2010. He's been cranking out shit. And I mean, he's been turning out classics kind of since the start. Like History Will
Yeah.
Absolve Me is like fucking 15 years old at this point. Like that's nuts. And I mean, obviously he's come out with other stuff. Most notably, my favorite Billy Woods project is the aforementioned Brass with More Mother. I love the chemistry between two of them. I feel like the points that they make on that record have never been more salient. It's such a corrosive, such a kind of, I mean, it is kind of an ugly album. Like listening to it is not fun. But it is kind of like you hear it and there is kind of there's a certain musicality to it that makes it like far from completely unbearable or just torturous to listen to or anything. But like Billy's the type of dude who's able to verbalize things in ways I'm adamant no other human could be able to do. I still think about shit like from the album Ethiops, which again, another fucking masterpiece that he's made. He talks about, I think the song actually does it reference Stephen King's Christine with a title or does it do it in the song? He basically describes seeing a drive-by shooting, I think, and the car that drives away and like compares it to Christine from Stephen King. And the way he does it is like the most chilling shit I've ever heard. Like Billy's ability to weaponize like anxiety and fear in his music is so kind of potent. And I feel like lately he's been using that to great effect, like on Maps most recently, where he takes
Yes,
that
I wanted to give a
and
special
then
shout to Maps as well.
like kind of at the very end and at some points in the middle, he'll kind of just take a moment where a song just sort of stops and he just takes a moment to digest everything. And those are like my favorite moments of Billy Woods where he just kind of lays everything out. Like NYC Tap Water, for instance, I think is an amazing sort of example of that. But like I don't know. I think that Rock Cried still might be the top of the shelf for both Billy and More Mother for me, but man, there is a treasure trove of the best contemporary hip hop in this guy's discography. You literally cannot go wrong with Billy Woods. He's and not to mention he's collaborative as fuck. He's got Arm & Hammer as well as his
Yeah,
stuff, and he's got his stuff with Preservation. Like, dude, you will find a Billy Woods album you like. It's there's I don't think there's anybody who's just like, yeah, man, none of his albums work. It's just like, I think you might be wrong about that.
all right, just for fun. I've got three more that I haven't mentioned, and I
Ooh.
want to see if I can pick one that isn't yet to come for you. So let me try to draft this. And I'm gonna say
I only have one that I think you won't guess.
I'm gonna say this. So this one is for me. I'm not just making my list to guess you
Okay.
out, but
Okay.
I think one that is not gonna be on your list is probably gonna be on mine because I'll just say it. Is Lauren Hill.
I really like this pick. I only didn't do it just because whenever I hear or listen to people I whose opinions I trust more on hip hop, they're just like, it's kind of like whatever with Lauryn Hill as to whether or not you can consider her a rapper, but like she does rap and she's great at it. So put that
For
to rest.
me, I agree with you that it's kind of an edge case, but between the Fugees, the score,
Hmm.
and between Miseducation, there's enough there that I feel like I can assess the quality. You know what I mean? A lot of her work is in some singer-songwriter territory that wouldn't necessarily put her at the top of an MC pile. But the
Hmm.
work that she is doing I think justifies the claim. You know, you have stuff like what's on the Fuji's album. You have, Do Wop That Thing, which
Hmm.
is a perfect blend of both of her amazing sides of performance. And I'll even on a good day go to bat for a couple of the songs on Unplugged, which I know it is a stain on her legacy. We're far enough removed to say that it's probably for a good reason.
Yo, Hunter, like that
We
the
didn't
MTV
need,
Unplugged for Lauryn Hill is like it's not one of my least favorite albums, but it is certainly one of the albums I enjoy listening to the least that I've heard in my life, just because it's like it feels like you're watching a woman have a nervous breakdown behind a pane of glass at a museum. It's like someone should have stopped this. Like I
yeah,
don't know how you would go about it, but someone needed to be like, "Hey, Lauren, we need to go." Like this
whatever,
is not working.
whatever, whatever got her there. I don't want to have that be an
Honestly,
influence on her again. Like, you know
after
what I
I
mean when I
after
say that?
watching FD's video on her and learning that her first major exposure into the world was performing at the Apollo, and I was like, "Oh, okay, everything about her makes sense now." Like she's a little girl going up on that stage and singing in front of people that will most assuredly boo her. And that footage exists and you can watch it and it's fucking painful. But like she's somebody who went through some real shit and you know, the fall from grace of Lauryn Hill is kind of one of the saddest stories in contemporary music. I really hate that there's so much bad blood between the Fugees now, and that's just kind of what she and Pross like are now. So it's easy to forget how fucking great she was because I mean she was. Like again, like the score I feel like especially like if you need like a testament to her rapping ability, there it fucking is. You do not need to go further than that, but we also have Miseducation too. So like she's tenuous, but like almost still feel like a list without her still feels incomplete.
I've already justified some stilted
Mhm.
discographies. And so I feel like this is not a case where I have to argue all that thoroughly for, oh, there's not enough good music. I'm telling you, I think that there is.
Mhm. Yeah.
We wouldn't still be talking about her if there wasn't. So,
Uh, and hey, I mean, for all that this entails, we also have Lauryn Hill to thank for, well, artists like Kanye who took very big inspiration from her when they were making good music. But you know, like I mean, literally, we wouldn't have All Falls Down without Lauryn Hill. That's a Lauryn Hill sample.
yeah, Lauryn Hill's influence should not be overshadowed by the gossip, by the drama.
Arbitrary blah.
I've only got one more, so or two more, and one of them I think is going to be on your list. So you go
Okay.
ahead.
Number three is going to be my dark horse pick right now. This is going to be the rapper with the is relative to everything else the least popular that made it the highest on my list. Number three is Open Mike Eagle.
Okay.
One of the first rappers I ever got into, right after MF Doom, which is funny because Open Mike Eagle's favorite rapper is MF Doom. He actually has a tribute video to MF Doom that I would highly recommend watching because it's very, very good. It's funny too because Open Mike Eagle has very recently become kind of like a streaming presence, as like a guy who's just kind of talking about industry stuff, and I follow him for that. But like, holy shit, this guy's discography, man. Like, there is simply no one who makes music like Open Mike Eagle. And that's because, like, he does not steer away from still being a very conscious, very topical rapper. But at the same time, I wouldn't really call him a conscious rapper because he raps mostly about himself and, like, his very normal existence. It's very much like Aesop Rock in that respect. What puts him over the edge for me is just how goddamn funny Mike is. Like he's amazing at getting you to feel shit when he wants to. His album from 2020, Anime Trauma and Divorce, is a testament to that. I think the hip hop line I have thought the most about in the last 5 years is still to this day. It's October and I'm tired. Like I remember hearing that in the middle of a holiday shift at Kohl's. I heard that line and was like, like, the way he says that is like the toll of 1,000 souls is weighing on him as he speaks that. But he also, he raps and talks about things like, anime, shit that I'm interested in. So I obviously, I catch all the references. I know what he's getting at. But he's also, again, he's very lyrical, like an Aesop Rock or whatever. He's very influenced and friends with Bus Driver, which, does provably have the greatest vocabulary in hip hop. Uh, but like he's witty, he's funny, he's emotional. Like he's got albums like Brick Body Kids Still Daydream, which is like about where like he grew up and sort of addresses that kind of systemic issue, but without taking the lens away from himself. The kind of crowning achievement of his, I think, is Dark Comedy. One of my favorite albums of all time, and has like a really interesting angle that I feel like no one talks about in that Dark Comedy is kind of a deconstructionist album in that it's kind of taking the piss out of what the idea of a normal rap album is. Like he's got a song like Qualifiers on there, and Qualifiers is just it's like a brag rap song. It's him very verbosely explaining why you should listen to him. It's just that in other ones, people are just like, oh, this person ain't shit, blah, 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 blah. Whereas Mike will frame it in a very unusual way, and you won't even understand that that's what he's doing. And then he gets to the little verse, the respect my qualifiers, respect my qualifiers. It's, God, he's good at hooks. Jesus Christ. He's a really good singer, honestly. Like, he's got a very vulnerable sounding voice. So whenever it pops up, I really appreciate it. But like the beats on Dark Comedy are so good. There's a fucking Hannibal Buress feature on this album that's so fucking funny. Like I'm pretty sure that there was at one point where he was talking about I'm pretty sure that like I stopped seeing so many people driving a Yaris after this verse. And like I know that's not possible, but I would like to think that this one bar from Hannibal Buress actually made the Yaris not sell as much because that's really funny. Um, but also I think that the thing with Mike is that above all else, there's not like a persona with him. He is just a real dude. He's just kind of a normal guy who's just so happens to be a fucking amazing writer, rapper, and poet. And, his subject material, it's a little bit more within my reach, I guess. Like, his stuff is very relatable. I feel like if you are an artist in any capacity, he will talk about things that speak to that experience. And he's just, again, he's somebody who I think really does kind of have it all. The discography is definitely there. He's got some great albums, fucking Dark Comedy, Brick Body Kids Still Daydream, Anime Trauma and Divorce, Animal Hospital, fucking like he's got so many great records and he has no sign of stopping for the immediate future. So I was kind of surprised to see him land this highly on my list, but I couldn't justify really putting him any lower.
Hmm. Certainly a blind spot for me, one that I need to get to very
Yeah,
soon.
dark comedy, definitely.
Dark comedy. Let's see. I've got two more. Let me go with one because I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure the
if
other.
you have like spoken a sentence with me, you know what these next two are for me.
I know what one of them is for certain. The other one
Uh-huh.
I'm still like rocking back and forth trying to figure out. But I want to give a shout out to Jid,
There
who
we go.
I've already talked about on the show. I was here for the Forever Story review. Y'all know I fuck with that album insanely. It has only grown on me every month, every year since its release. I come back to it. I'm just like, damn, this is fantastic. I love Jid. I His work both on this, on his last major mixtape, DiCaprio 2, but also he's a major highlight on larger group ensembles. Like he has been on those big Dreamville albums, and he's
Yep.
always a big highlight. He was part of the Spillage Village collective
Hmm.
and put out some really great verses there. But I am really excited to see Jid come into his own, and I think Riley was the one who compared Forever Story to Good Kid, Mad City
Yep.
very, very appropriately. And so I'm wondering kind of where the next angle is going to be for
Like
him. Like, what's the
w-
next move?
not explicitly in these terms, but like the thought in the back of your head is, does he have a T-pad in him? Because I bet he does.
What does it sound like? It doesn't have to sound like T-Pab. I'm over
No,
that
in fact,
notion.
dude, I want a Southern hip hop T-pad. It would be so fucking
Right.
sick, dude.
What is the opus going to sound like? And we've had so a lot of features from him surrounding the Forever Story that give us some insight into that. I mean, one of my favorite verses probably ever is his verse on "Melt My Eyes."
So good.
About Shawshanking out the shit, and and I just think he is one of the most. He's the closest I think I get to my love of like lyrical miracle territory, even though he himself hates that own delineation and doesn't seem to like that part of his style, even though he's really good at it and it gets him places. But I have a lot of appreciation for his more melodic cuts too, in a way that I think get a little bit short end of the stick. Stuff like
He's
on
such a good singer. Like
yeah, on Forever Story, like
crazy.
Cody Blue 31, Can't Make You Change. Both of those songs show a more vocal, a more melodic side of his performance that I want a whole album of songs that sound like that. I want that R&B tinged Southern hip hop out of him, and I think I would be very happy to hear that.
Frankly, Jid catches a lot of Kendrick comparisons in the sense that he has a higher pitched voice and raps very well. Um, but I do think that there is kind of a comparison between the two, just in like they are both kind of so skilled it goes over your head how good they are at first. And then when they're actually showing off, you're like, oh, oh shit. Um, and in that respect, I think that Jid is maybe the most promising artist from that guard of rap right now. And hey, I said I feel like this album's gonna grow on me because I was notably the least hot on the Forever Story, even though I still really liked it. And that album has absolutely grown on me. Like it's so fantastic. I really do love that record now. And if we're talking about the Kendrick comparisons, like look, Kendrick's obviously the bigger artist, he's got the bigger discography and everything, but like Jid's melodic cuts definitely better than Kendrick's. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Actually, okay, I take it back. His melodic cuts on GNX are about as good as Jid's. His melodic cuts on Damn, frankly, Jid outpaces the shit out of him in that. He's just a lot better at that particular aspect. And like, hey, everybody, I know you want new music from Jid. Stop fucking asking him. It's
Yeah, don't
just
be
going
weird.
to annoy him.
I know
His
I was saying
label
that
probably
earlier.
has it.
I know I was saying that earlier that like I can't wait to see what he does next, but I'm not trying to be weird about it, man. I'm
No,
really not.
it's like, and he's just like, dude, I'm trying. I can't do anything about it. Like, people a part of Dreamville have recently come out and just been like, they won't release my fucking music. And it's like, guys, I really don't think this is his fault. But even if it is, it's just like, yeah, we've got what, the one, two, three, four albums from him? Three?
Yeah, yeah, three
Never
albums.
Story, DiCaprio 2, DiCaprio, Forever Story.
DiCaprio was a mixtape or EP, one of
That's
the two. It's
that's
not
why I'm forgetting
technically
it. I
under
think
the
it is a
album
mixtape.
chart, but
But yeah, like if you're not already on the Jid train, get on it because frankly, this dude this next album though, whenever it does come out, like it's gonna be big. It'll probably be
just
the
sneak up on y'all if you're not paying attention.
mm-hmm.
I guarantee
Don't
you.
let it. Don't let it.
Go ahead, because I know where you're
Okay.
fucking going now that I've read about
Perfect
this.
segue. Perfect segue. Number two, Kendrick. It's Kendrick Lamar.
We haven't talked about GNX. Can we just talk about GNX?
Yes,
Let's do it
actually, we
that
have
way.
not talked about GNX, and I don't think we would talk about it otherwise. I fucking love GNX. Uh, we've done a discography breakdown for Kendrick. We've done reviews for some of his stuff. We've talked about him in the past. We've talked about the beef. We've talked about its effects. You can find all of that stuff. So you know my opinion on Kendrick. Kendrick is the artist that I deem responsible for me being a music fan. Because quite literally, without TPAB, I wouldn't be listening to albums right now. So I love Kendrick, and no one is ever going to supplant that kind of position in my life that listening to TPAB out of order for 6 straight months got me. That said, GNX, his latest effort, is basically like, yeah, it's a victory lap album, but it is also a little bit more than that because it's just more than anything else. I think that GNX is a love letter to Compton. It is Kendrick making music. It is by someone from Compton for people who are from Compton. And in that, you get some really like, I feel like there's a lot of lyrical content on this album that really goes over people's heads. Like, Man in the Garden and Whacked Out Murals are two of his best written songs, in my opinion. Like, they are, again, they're really punchy. They've got great production, but they're also like, they're really fun. But I mean, the bangers on here, yes, Squabble Up, TV Off. These are some of the most memorable musical moments of the year in a year colored by memorable moments that Kendrick Lamar himself made. Like, nobody can do what he's doing right now. And there's no better evidence than who? Show me who. They're not
One of
there. It's
my
just him.
one of my favorite musical moments of the year, and I've not seen anybody else talk about this, and it drives me nuts because I noticed it and I could not. Oh my God, it drove me insane. It was so good. During Gloria at the very end,
Mm,
where the line "Baby Boo" when he goes into that part of it, you hear this little guitar lick come in,
mhm.
and it's the piano riff from Father Time. It's the same melody.
Yo! Okay.
And it clicked with me,
That's genius.
and I caught it immediately, and it completely blew me away. It's such a genius riff on a previous piece of his work that also I feel like went under discussed, but one that has stuck with me more than anything else on its respective album. I love Father Time. I love Gloria. I feel like Gloria is going to be kind of a sleeper hit for Kendrick, or at least I hope it is. I
Yeah.
hope it's a live show staple, even given the necessity of SZA's presence on it, because I just adore every second of that song. More and more so, what I love about GNX is his want to unabashedly embrace a kind of self love, you know? Like he has
No.
spent a lot of time this year making it look easy, but probably sacrificing a lot of himself for this kind of larger force in his mind and his life. And that is, defending hip hop, defending the culture, defending the art. And GNX feels like a time where he doesn't completely take a step back, but he allows himself to prop his feet up for a few minutes and really give himself a pat on the back, but also never get away from his own criticisms. You have like Reincarnated, for example, where he's talking about,
Incarnated.
yeah, a continuation of that savior complex dialogue that he's had throughout a lot of his albums. But Gloria really feels like a moment where he's at peace with himself in a way that he's not apologizing for, which separates it from the way that he was able to do that on Mr. Morale, which feels like a very apologetic and very compromised kind of statement in a way that's very admirable, in a way that's very interesting. But this on GNX feels like I'm not the first person to bring this up, but it feels like the gif of Thanos at the end of Infinity War where he's looking at the sunset.
That's definitely the feeling that radiates from it. And I did talk a little bit of shit about Kendrick's melodic cuts on Damn, like Loyalty, for instance, or God, which just like those are probably like my two least favorite Kendrick songs, other than maybe like No Makeup, I guess. But he has like literally the amount of songs I dislike from Kendrick I can count on one hand. But that said, the melodic cuts on here, Luther, ah.
Oh my god,
Oh man, the fucking if this world were mine. That's
the
such a
harmonies.
good
Kendrick,
cut.
I don't know what he did. The vocal exercise must have been amazing that day because
And
he sounds
getting like
amazing.
the secret weapon that is SZA, who can just pop up on any song and make it 300% better just because her voice sounds like the caress of an angel. But like Jesus, like this is an album where I do feel like it exemplifies an aspect of Kendrick that goes undersung and that like a lot of people are very like assume that he's a very self-serious artist, and to some extent that's absolutely true. But also, like, he's a fucking goofball. Like, listen to his old music. Like, I mean,
Listen to the title track of this album.
or like King Kunta, for example. There's literally a doing sound effect in King Kunta. Like, come on, man. Like, this is a guy who I feel like a lot of people's assigning him the martyrdom complex let them be like completely blind to what he actually is. And like, yeah, he's still got that martyrdom complex and everything, but like at this rate, he's shown me that he's taken that and like he's not better, or he's not like necessarily, it doesn't come across as though Kendrick is 100% better from the problems that ailed him a decade ago, but it is sort of like he's coming onto the scene, he's just like, I'm dealing with them much better. And you believe it. Like that's what his recent music, GNX and Mr. Morale, tell me, is that this is a really interesting contrast between, I think, Kendrick at his least confident and Kendrick at his most confident. And when you smash the two of them together, you get a character portrait that is really fucking all inclusive. I think the biggest sign so far that the final nail in the coffin of the beef is just that like Kendrick has moved on and Drake hasn't. Like
Yeah,
that's I can't tell you more definitive proof of victory than that.
is that he sounds like he's done.
It does.
Like,
And there is no one else who I think could have as thoroughly ruined him as Kendrick did. And I mean, I got to admire the gumption if nothing else, but like Kendrick isn't my favorite rapper purely because I feel like the skill and artistry of my number one just appeals to me more and might specifically like match Kendrick or even surpass him in some instances. But like in terms of who my favorite hip hop artist is, like artist in the all-inclusive sense, yeah, it's Kendrick. Like I can't even lie. Like it is just him. I have thought about his body of work maybe more than shit, most of my like more proper favorite bands and artists at this rate. Like I spent more time thinking about Kendrick Lamar than I did Bruce Springsteen last year, and that's fucking impressive. So, I mean, it's Kenny.
it's Kenny.
Kung Fu Kenny.
All right. I think I know what number one is
Oh yeah.
because he is on my list as well.
Okay, all right.
Someone that we are going to be talking about in May. Is that when
Oh
it comes
God, I
out?
fucking hope so. I don't remember the exact release date, but we've made no effort to partially bury this lead. But my number one personally is, of course, David Diggs of Clipping. Um, listen to Clipping's discography. I mean, like what better point can I make other than like, hey, just do this and you'll understand why he's number one. Like we've talked about one of the most overriding things about the two of us specifically is our predilection with horror, like our obsession with it. And it was like I had always liked Clipping's albums, but it wasn't until 2019's There Existed an Addiction to Blood that I became like a fervent fan of Clipping because I listened to that shit so much. I got a hold of it so much sooner that it actually came out because there was a leak that was going around. And so I got to listen to that forever. And I was just like, y'all are not ready. Y'all are
Oh
not ready
shit.
for this shit. And frankly, I was doubly proven right because they did that and then did it again with fucking Visions of Bodies being burned. It's like I get it that originally was supposed to be a double album, but like those work as individual records somehow. And the cool thing about Clipping is that they always have like a specific slated horror concept to whatever release they're going with. Like sort of with their release that has to do with like there's one of them that's like an undersea sort of like Lovecraftian
Yeah, the deep.
yeah, the deep one, which is about like undersea aquatic sort of people coming on land and eating them and killing them. And then there's also the mini slasher movie homages in and horror movie homages like Candyman and Scream and the new two Clipping albums that are just so again all inclusive when it comes to horror. But like their earlier stuff is like a particularly gritty or horror infused take on something you'd see in a season of The Wire or something like that. And then they go still further. There's the space horror concept of something like Splendor and Misery, which is just a fucking, God, what a fucking underrated record that is. And then they'll have their technical self-titled album where they only they don't indulge in first-person storytelling at all, which is why the eyes in Clipping are not in Clipping on that release. And it's like, when you couple that the fact with like David has to handle all of these and not make it sound like gimmicky or insincere or just like he's paying lip service to a bunch of aesthetics, like I believe that the people in Clipping fucking love whatever they're talking about at any given moment. And David's pen is still only as good as the fucking bug nut crazy shit production of Clipping allows him to be. Do you know how much skill it takes to ride some of these beats? Because it's a lot. Like that one song on There Existed an Addiction to Blood where they have to time it because they're playing the fucking beat on a van that drives by them that they have to time at the perfect point in the song. Dude, who else is doing weird shit like this? Like Daveed Diggs shows up in like the most random shit. Like I'm pretty sure he was on like Sesame Street at one point.
Yeah.
He's got the movie Blind Spotting, one of my favorite fucking movies of the decade, where honestly, he's got performances on that movie soundtrack that are fucking great. And his final fucking monologue is wrapped in that movie, and
Yeah.
it is fucking chilling. Like that is one of the moments in film I will just like never forget about is the final confrontation in Blind Spotting. And it's mostly because of David. Like he's an amazing actor. He, kind of got the ball rolling because he was in Hamilton. And then it's just like, oh, Hamilton, huh? And now you want to make real rap music. Okay. Just I hope you're real careful. But he has never delved into like again the kind of pageantry that I feel like a lot of or gimmicks that like he's not a Lin-Manuel Miranda exactly.
Right.
He loves hip hop. Like you can just tell, and it bleeds through in every syllable. He's such a talented MC, man. Like I don't know how you rap over these beats and the fact that he does get like lyrical miracle sometimes with the speed, but he always like revs up the intensity. It's always within the pacing of the song to make you be like really excited. It's not like Rap God where it's just like every single fucking every verse is just like and the chorus is just like it's like no, the song suits the lyricism rather than the other way around. So the
Right.
entire process of how Clipping makes music probably has to do with this, but it does feel like David is just like, you do the writing and performing part, so you get to focus 100% of your attention on that. Let us worry about the beats. And he's just the best. He's just the best. When I'm listening to that dude, I'm like, this is the art form right here. This is it.
Yeah, I mean, David is a technical Master, the breath
Mhm.
control is insane. If you want a demonstration of that, listen to The Breach from Splendor and
Oh,
Misery, which is
yeah.
only like a 30-second long verse. It's longer than most songs.
Hmm.
Like there are more words than you get on most songs. He can be insanely fast, yes, but he's very consistent, right? He can keep a rhythm with that stuff in a way that you can follow perfectly if you're giving it enough attention. You're not going to get lost in the sauce. You're going to be able
No.
to follow along with the way that things are going, and they're paced that way for a reason. I loved in an interview, the three of them were talking about how their recording sessions are basically just they sit around and talk for 6 hours about
Yep.
how things should sound, and then they spend 30 minutes actually doing
They sound
it.
like they have like the synergy, they sound like they've got it. Like, you've got so many bands and collectives that feel like, they could break up at any moment or anything. But I feel like the guys in Clipping are just so fucking chill and all kind of like the same shit. So they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever happens, happens. David just happens to be like, I don't remember who said this. Hell, it could have been you for all I know. But somebody I know once called him the Rod Sterling of hip hop, and I completely agree with that. It's perfect. It's like he is a showman. He is like he's there to present it to you, to narrate it for you, and there's just like, yeah, that's it. It almost feels like it's in tandem with like like Clipping. They are definitely more popular than they used to be, but like the rise of Clipping and like the ascendancy of like the cultural impact of somebody like Jordan Peele doesn't feel like a mistake to me, because it feels like those three movies are like unreleased Clipping songs.
Hell, they've got a. I wonder if they'll actually use it in the film, but they have a trailer for the new Ryan Coogler joint that has the
Oh,
Clipping song
it's
in
so
it.
good.
I joked with some friends that if the new Candyman didn't have say the name at the end of it, I'd
Oh,
walk out.
that's
And
so
of course,
good though.
I wasn't actually putting money on that, but it would have been
No.
nice to see. But no,
No,
Clipping.
absolutely.
We talked about horrorcore a bit earlier, and Clipping is an act that owes a lot of its lineage to the horrorcore originators, and I feel like David in particular owes some things to the work that RZA was doing with Gravediggers, which hasn't come up until this
Yep.
point, but one that I
Gravediggers
feel like needs a special
and
shout.
Dalek are like, you combine them together, that's how you get Clipping.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, and we're going to talk about this more in our discography breakdown, which we're already planning, but a
Hmm.
discography that is perfectly sequenced for newcomers. Like what I
Yes.
tell people who want to get into clipping is just start at the beginning and go through.
It's just like, if you like anything on Mid City, keep going. Like that's the best advice I can give you. It's just like, if you like literally any song on that album, keep going from there on.
So, yes, I feel like David, maybe I genuinely hope that clipping makes it to a canon status at some point. I genuinely do hope that they can keep putting out good music to the sense that they enter this same kind of circle that dominates this kind of writing, this kind of listicle, whatever you want to call it.
Being used in a big horror movie trailer, I want to believe this means that they're on the real rise. Like, I really fucking hope so.
But I mean, part of the reason that we wanted to do this was to shout out people that don't normally get put in these kinds of conversations.
Precisely.
People
And
that don't.
like, he's totally worthy of being a number one. Like, skill, discography, it's there, frankly. Like, the cultural impact isn't, but like, unless you're specifically making a list to assess that, eh.
By sheer volume of good music, clipping is hard to surpass.
You'll hear every
I have
good
to say
word. David's got the most.
it.
He says them real fast. Also, I just fucking, it's so cool that there existed Addiction to Blood Begins with a fucking like John Carpenter synth. God, that song is so fucking hype. It's so good.
It's music for nerds, which
Mhm.
like hip hop has always that's the secret of hip hop is that in some ways it's always kind of a music for nerds.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely like, it's just for people who are really, really, well, I mean, it's for people who really, really love the form. Like, that's just it at the end of the day, is that it's about just a communal appreciation for it. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this list, is because like, it kind of sucks when you just see every list being like, okay, we gotta pay acknowledge to this and that and blah blah blah. And look, I'm not saying that those people don't deserve respect, but we can do respect in a way that doesn't completely homogenize everything that we talk about.
I feel like the two of us have done a fair shake of the paying respects to the elder statesman while
Yeah.
also being like, there's new shit on the scene that even if everybody that I put on this list, even if they never put out another song again,
Hmm.
I would probably still have on this list for a really long time. Like,
Absolutely.
I do not put anyone on this list that I feel like still needs to grow to earn their spot. And I've justified some scant discographies, but
That's it,
that's
really.
what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna justify it.
And frankly, most of the those greatest rappers of all times list, take a look at some of their catalogs. Some of them not exactly big. Like, yeah, you got your Jays and Nas, and they got like, 10-ish albums, sometimes more than that. But, again, you'll see Lauryn Hill, and it's like you've got two, technically, mostly just one though, because that's her. There's fucking Notorious B.I.G. is on like every single list ever, and it's just like, oh, all two albums that he released when he was alive. So it's like, who fucking cares?
Sometimes the volume doesn't, sometimes less is more. It's quality over quantity, I should say.
Yeah, and that's just what we wanted to do. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up.
All right, well, give us your list in the comments below, and hey, don't just give us a list. Tell us why, because that's what's interesting about this. Like, like I want to hear this from people, just because, give me an interesting answer. Or hell, if your favorite rapper is Nasir J, fucking stick to it and defend your position. I don't fucking care. Just tell me what you love. That's all I ask.
Yeah, yeah.
And well, I guess rock over London, rock on Chicago, uh fucking Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all. Damn.